Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining our project concept development training day 1. And this training will run for 3 days, starting from today and end on Wednesday. The Caribbean is undoubtedly a haven for renewable energy and shows significant potential in tapping into energy efficiency. But we are not there as yet. We have not met our targets. And although in a number of ways we continue to work towards it, there is a lot left to be done. So we recognize the importance of project development, and not just project development, but project development towards developing high quality projects. Getting financing or successful investment into projects is the only way that we can meet our targets and move from concepts to investment and to deployment and implementation. Getting investment for our projects or attracting investments and financing requires de-risking our projects to a point that investors and financiers are confident enough to invest in sustainable projects. And this is true for all scales of sustainable energy projects, from smaller projects to larger projects. In 2019, the CCREEE would have conducted a needs assessment across the private sector that showed that private sector project proponents felt that the leading hindrance towards successful project development was a lack or insufficient capacity among private sector proponents to develop projects that become investment mature. And so in 2020, the CCREEE launched its project preparation facility intended to bridge the gap between these promising project concepts and mature and successful investments. And so this morning's training, or the training that you will participate in for the next 3 days, is intended to build the capacity across CARICOM. And from our registrations, we note that we have a wide cross-section of participants here this morning, from utilities, from government agencies, and from the private sector. And so we look forward to taking you through these 3 days, and hopefully at the end of the 3 days, we will have experts among us in project development, or at least developing a project concept. Now, we have a number of speakers today, but I also just want to take the opportunity to mention the main facilitator and consultant in the person of Enrique Reboledo. And Enrique is with us through support of TAPSEC, and that is the Technical Assistance Project for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean. And just some housekeeping matters. As we go through the training, we want it to be meaningful for participants. And so we are glad to introduce the assistance of a help desk. Throughout the 3 days, participants are encouraged to submit specific questions through the CCREEE PPF email, and that is ppf@ccree.org. And the CCREEE technical team, along with our consultant, Mr. Enrique Reboledo, will be able to respond. And the help desk will run from today until Friday. In particular, we invite those who may already be in the process of developing project concepts to reach out if there are specific and particular matters that may arise that you may require some assistance on. Our team is working on sharing a project concept template, which will be used throughout the 3 days in the training. And in addition, a case study that will help to guide the session as we go through. Let me recognize the presence of our team members through the CCREEE PPF, also our capacity building expert who would have assisted us in putting together this training. Without further ado, I invite our Executive Director, Dr. Gary Jackson, to deliver brief introductory remarks. Over to you, Dr. Jackson.
Good morning, all. Thank you so much for being here this morning. While we are here, we need to support and develop our people's capacity, and that is very important for us. We don't just want to give you the fish that we'll take from the blue ocean. We want to take you to the ocean and teach you how to fish. We should give you the right tools and provide the right enabling environment, policy and regulatory frameworks that you can be able to navigate the landscape that you're working in, so you could achieve success, leaving no man behind. We need a plan and a well-defined structure to support the Sustainable Development Goals. This is like a building block approach, a bottom-up approach that will support your development. This, we believe, will establish projects for implementation with the appropriate mechanism for capital injection, either through an initial public offer, public-private partnership, among others. And of course, we need the right partnerships for this success to happen. This is what we have described as our 5P principle: people, policy, plan, project, and partnerships. Our project preparation capacity development is very critical for this transition. Projects built by communities, for communities. Invest in our people, invest in our projects, invest in our services. So at the very start, you will find that there are a number of unknowns. And we need to know as much as possible to de-risk these projects. And so, in some instances, to get support, we need to establish if we have a site. We need to establish if we know the resource of that site and understand that resource. We need our projects to be transactional, so we need to know who the off-takers are. We need to understand the permit requirements and environmental conditions of where our projects will be sited. We need to define the technology or understand the technology that we want to deploy. Hopefully it's proven technology, so you don't have challenges coming into the space. You need to set up the right team to deliver these projects. And you need the right capital and the right cost of capital for these projects to be deployed, and the right construction methodology to support the development of these projects going forward. We call this ENHANCE acronym that we have gotten from NREL as SHROPTIC. So you'll see it a lot in some of these things that we're discussing. But within that framework, you need to have, as I mentioned, the team. You need to know who's responsible for what. So you need to have the right structures. You need to know who's accountable for what, who will be supporting these actions, who will be consulted, who will be informed, and who will be implementing. So as we develop and we go through this course today with you, and not only today, but going forward, that you can reach out to us for us to help to support the energy transition for the region. Thank you so much, and have a great course for the rest of this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. and very electric words to kickstart this training session. And I'm seeing we have representatives and participants, seeing the greetings in the chat from Suriname, from Trinidad, from all over, within and outside of the Caribbean. Welcome, participants. We are very glad to have you. Before I introduce the next speaker, let me take the opportunity to introduce myself. I am Charlene Bodley, Project Development and Gender Expert with the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the CCREEE. Now, Dr. Jackson spoke about the 5 Ps, bringing components together for success. And most certainly, the CCREEE PPF would not have had the success that it has today without partnerships. And so, again, let me mention and recognize the support from TAPSEC, the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean. And TAPSEC has been instrumental in supporting the CCREEE across all its programs, and in particular, the CCREEE PPF. The Project Preparation Facility, PPF, has also been established through partnership with Get Invest and PFAN, and I take this opportunity to recognize their support. And so at this point, I invite Mr. Simon Selner, who is the program lead for TAPSEC, and frankly, a great friend to CCREEE. Mr. Selner, over to you.
Thank you, Charlene, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak to you all at the opening of this important training. We all know that the Caribbean is at the mercy of high energy costs and a very heavy dependence on fossil fuels. In addition to the negative environmental impacts, this dependency limits the region's potential for growth. The good news is that the Caribbean is rich in clean natural energy resources and that can power its future for generations to come. And that's why we are all here today, to bridge the gap between the sustainable energy projects that need financial support and the financial institutions that are prepared to provide it. The Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, which is being implemented by the German Development Corporation, GIZ, and funded by the European Union and the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, is very proud to partner with the CCREEE in executing this training. TAPSEC is committed to supporting the Caribbean's transition to sustainable development, and we know that the journey requires a comprehensive all-hands-on-deck approach. Through our partnership with CCREEE, we support initiatives like the Project Preparation Facility, which is just one of the measures by which they are leading sustainable energy capacity development in the region. Within the umbrella of the PPF, its Project Concept Development Training Program is an important part of the groundwork necessary to get your projects ready to attract the financing required to move from concept to reality. With the insight you gain over the next 3 days, you'll be able to create project proposals that will show financial institutions why they should invest in your renewable energy or energy efficiency project. The higher registration numbers show that there is a big demand for such a training. I hope this training will provide you with the required information and tools for your jobs to bring more projects on a bankable stage. I'd also like to encourage you already now to provide feedback to the training through the feedback forms at the end of the course. Your feedback will be very important for us to plan future training interventions and perhaps also a follow-up training course. At the end of my remarks, let me thank the CCREEE team, especially Charlene, Gerald Lindo, Sapphire Vital, as well as the team of consultants from GFA headed by Enrique Reboledo, and all presenters for your contribution, and of course also you, the participants, for connecting today. So thank you very much and have a productive workshop.
Thank you so much, Mr. Selner. At this time, I remind of some of our housekeeping rules. You would notice that you have the option of using the Q&A function in Zoom. And while you would see some correspondence from our team, and let me also introduce our communications team, Ms. Penny Bowen and Ms. Deanne Wood, and they would be addressing some of your concerns and interacting with you in the chat. But as the presenters go through the program and present their various areas of expertise, we do invite you to use the Q&A function to pose your questions, and the questions will be answered there. And given that we have many participants, while we would love to hear your voices, we will have to play it by ear, but we do encourage you again to use the option of the help desk. And I will just ask my team, and I see it's already written into the chat, please pay attention to the email address that you could send your questions to access the help desk, and that is ppf@ccree.org. And so we move on into the agenda, and I will begin with a very brief presentation that looks at an overview of the CCREEE PPF. It's always important for us to understand why we do what we do, and I hope that this presentation will shed some light on why the PPF has been set up and why it is critical to our sustainable energy transition in the Caribbean. So you would notice my title is the CCREEE Project Preparation Facility, the engine room for deployment. And I cannot stress enough how important it is, as we've heard from Mr. Selner, from Dr. Jackson. The end goal is that we get investments and we have projects implemented on the ground. And we cannot do that without successful and careful project development. So these are the 3 points I will focus on. In addition, I will introduce something that CCREEE is working on through partnerships again, and that is the IUS. So let's start with the PPF, what it is and why it is currently established. The urgency cannot be undermined. We've been speaking renewable energy for years. The climate data, the information that we get from COP, the IPCC reports, very dismal. And so the Caribbean increasingly, and I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, have experienced a hurricane or a storm that has affected us in one way or another. And there are other external shocks. For example, the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and we see the immediate effect of the price of fuel in such unprecedented and uncanny situations that are not anticipated. And so the Caribbean must accelerate its move to becoming economically resilient, climate resilient. And that means that we must pursue relentlessly and unapologetically energy security and independence. And to do so, that has to be led by the deployment. So technologies is one thing, it's available. Technologies are mature. We've been hearing for decades about solar, and the prices are trending downwards. Electric mobility, sustainable transport, technologies are proving to be very mature and are deployed in other parts of the world. And so Caribbean people must participate and accelerate and press gas on transitioning the Caribbean energy sector. And so the CCREEE PPF is a go-to facility in the region for converting commercially viable renewable energy and energy efficiency project concepts into tangible, bankable projects that can secure investment necessary for implementation. And you would note the words that are bolded: converting, so conversion. The facility converts. And what do we want to end up with? We want to end up with commercially viable projects. How do projects become commercially viable? How do we take our project concepts to a point of being commercially viable and therefore bankable investment, mature projects that can attract the right levels of financing? And I'm mentioning bankability and investment because it is sure that renewable energy project development requires high upfront costs and high investment costs. And while we have the desire to implement our projects, we don't always have the financing, but the financing is available. So the key is, how do we develop projects in a way that it can access that financing that is out there and available? And so the PPF targets the most significant barrier that impedes successful project development, and that is an unavailability of technical and financial resources to develop these great ideas and concepts that we have into investment mature outcomes. And so our reality is this: significant new investments in clean energy must be made in order that we meet our energy, climate mitigation, and sustainability goals. Potential and opportunities for unlocking sustainable energy investments in the region remain largely untapped. And I draw your attention, for those of you who may like to engage in research, to a CSOM's report that would have looked at where we're at. It looks at our targets, but most importantly, we can see what our potential for renewable energy is across various technologies: solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, bioenergy. And of course, looking at where we're at and where we can be, there is a huge gap. And so our indigenous resources remain largely untapped. Sustainable energy can provide companies with an increase in profitability and improve corporate stature and even create more jobs. So there's a social aspect here. And the corporate world stands to benefit significantly from implementing sustainable energy. The region experiences capacity constraints to take sustainable energy projects from concept to investment maturity. And effective project preparation is essential to attract and accelerate investment. So these are our realities. Now, from the initiation of a project right down to closure, that must be managed very, very well and executed to a T. This must also be driven by high quality data. Now, from the inception stage of a project, from the moment that you decide, I want to do a project, you need information and you need to go through the process. And my point here is simply that you simply cannot skip the essentials to have a successful project. And so from initiation, we expect that you should be able to develop a project concept. And that is, again, the main purpose of this training, to take you through developing a concept that clearly outlines what your sustainable energy project, and by that I mean, I refer both to energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. Now, you would notice that I have highlighted in blue the planning and development stage, and that is because that is primarily where the CCREEE PPF will come in. So you notice that it is not the first step, and that means that we really do need you, project proponents, potential applicants to the facility, to be able to manage the initiation stage of your project, because we cannot support the planning and development stage, cannot be entered into unless the initiation stage is down to a T. And so really what the planning and development phase is a de-risking process. The more information we have, the more we are able to de-risk. The more information we can provide to an investor, to our bank, the more likely they would be to invest in your project. And really that process ensures profitability, it ensures satisfied beneficiary companies, and also responsible stewardship. So I like to focus also on the triple bottom line. In the past, we conventionally focus on the bottom line when we look at businesses in the private sector. But in the world of sustainable energy projects, we really should be looking at the 3 Ps, and that is profits, planet, and people. And so the CCREEE PPF really provides support throughout the development cycle of a project. Your pre-feasibility and feasibility stages, looking at your site, the site that has been chosen for your project, is it appropriate? The social aspects, is the project located in an area that significantly affects the environment and livelihoods of community members? Who are the beneficiaries of your project? What is the technology that will be used? What is the resource assessment? What is your project team composition? And so the facility really assists in developing all of these components towards documentation. And then you would have to engage with an EPC, an engineering, procurement, and construction contractor. The facility also enables and assists with the procurement processes, developing procurement documents. Matchmaking. Yes, it is true that you may reach the point of having an investment and bankable project, but also there is the need to be able to effectively match your project to the right sources of financing or investment. And then deployments. And deployments really takes us down to financial close, where and there are a number of options to deploy your projects, but focusing on the financing, there are so many different models, and understanding these models will be important. And so in a nutshell, the PPF offers technical services, matchmaking services, and with a regional outlook, the PPF supports maintaining and expanding a regional project pipeline to benefit from economies of scale. And the PPF does offer services, capacity building services to private sector, public sector, and financial institutions. So in a nutshell, the business process is very simple. A project is originated. Now, for that project to be originated, a project concept must be successfully developed. And that would increase your chances of qualifying for the PPF support. So our evaluation process would require that you do have at least a solid project concept. And so we move to the selection of projects based on the eligibility. And once your project is eligible, the project will receive our technical services. And again, these extend to matchmaking services. I wanted to mention very briefly another program that CCREEE is engaged in because it has such a close link to the project preparation facility, and that is the integrated utility services. So ESCOs have long been spoken about in the Caribbean, and essentially they are energy service companies that are set up to support project organization and financing for promoting sustainable energy, building energy use. So essentially, you have a private sector company that comes in and does your energy, sustainable energy efficiency, implements these measures, and they are paid off of the savings. That is in a nutshell, a simplified version of what an ESCO is. Of course, through the decades, we have been discussing in the Caribbean the risks associated with that approach. Now, the integrated utility services really is a means of countering some of these risks, and it is a utility-based ESCO operating with the same principle, and essentially becomes a critical intermediary between energy service providers and potential clients. So the IUS helps to meet demand for ESCO services and contribute to achieving more buildings that are low carbon but high performance in their energy use with lowered risk. Now, I won't go into too much detail as this presentation is not intended to focus in detail on the IUS, but the purpose of this slide is to show how all the players come in together. So you have your utility, your financial institution, technical energy service providers, your clients, and your regulators. And you would notice some of the flow. So we will make these presentations available to you. Again, if you have answers, please do not hesitate to send us an email, and we can respond to you. That runs through our help desk that runs until Friday of this week. So I already spoke about the actors within the IUS. And I just wanted to get to the point that the CCREEE PPF also provides services to enhance the IUS approach through pilot projects, business model development and enhancement, investment pipeline development, among other services. I now invite you to watch a very short video that summarizes what the CCREEE PPF is.
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar PV and thermal, hydropower, energy storage, wind, waste to energy, and greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up enterprises such as energy power generation, efficiency, and solutions projects. For more information on project preparation facility support, visit www.ccree.org/ppf.
I thank you for your attention during this presentation, and I direct you again to the screen. Please do not hesitate to email us. I particularly encourage you to do so between today and Wednesday. We will be responding to specific questions and concerns until Friday of this week. And we move on to a presentation from my colleague, Mr. Gerald Lindo. And Gerald is the sustainable energy expert at the CCREEE. Gerald will walk us through a presentation that focuses on sustainable energy technologies and will give us a regional outlook of the project development landscape. Gerald?
Check, everybody hearing me now? Let me share my presentation and get this underway. Morning, everybody. I'm going to run you through in the next, let's say a little bit less than 30 minutes, a presentation on sustainable energy technology considerations, and also give you a bit of a regional outlook on some of these issues that would pertain to project development. Just a little bit of introduction and disclaimer, first of all. My name is Gerald Lindo. I'm sustainable energy expert with the CCREEE. My personal, how I would describe my expertise, I know a bit about building efficiency, especially, know quite a bit about biomass and biofuels, climate risk, environmental risk, and energy policy, generally speaking. And so I hope to bring some of that to this presentation today. One thing though, or a couple of things, this presentation, first of all, is not investment advice. Don't take it to the bank. It is not going to cover every single technology that is out there in the world, but basically the ones that we think are the most salient for the region. If we want to talk about different technologies, we can certainly take that during the Q&A. And finally, this is intended to be broad, not particularly deep, because we only have 30 minutes. You could spend an hour, you could spend a day, you could spend a week on some of these single technologies. So if you want a bit of a deeper engagement on specific technologies, I would strongly encourage you to sign up for the CEKH, that's the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, that's cekh.ccree.org, where you can find a lot of our videos, presentations, knowledge products that go much, much deeper into some of the things I'm going to just touch on today. You can also check our YouTube channel, of course. An outline of this presentation. I'm going to start with a conceptual framework for project development. Both Charlene and Dr. Jackson touched on it earlier, but I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to talk again about some of those technology considerations that would be pertinent to project development with a focus on just 6 areas: efficiency, solar, wind, hydro, storage technologies, and e-mobility. I want to give an overview of activity in the region with respect to project development, a little bit about targets, deployment levels, policy, and also, very importantly, climate action. And I want to give you a little bit of a taste of the sources of support that exist for the work that needs to be done so that you, the project developers, and those people interested in projects can tap into those or at least start. Firstly, let's talk about this conceptual framework for project development. And it's important, I think, because a lot of times we don't like to think about theory, or we think of theory almost as a pejorative term. But I think it's very important to understand why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and ground that in a theoretical framework so that we can think clearly and think straight. The value of a conceptual framework, I think, for us at least, was very well articulated first by NREL. As Dr. Jackson had mentioned, a lot of what we do here builds on a framework that was established by NREL in the document you see referenced on your screen. Just to take an excerpt from the start of that document, the two major concepts to establish a common understanding and language around the fundamental principles of project development are, first, project motivation, and two, the project development environment. Now, what do we mean by motivation? A motivated project is one that has a strong basis to come to fruition and is built on economics and risks that are acceptable to both parties and includes supportive policies, an execution pathway, and at least some view to project bankability. The second concept now, the project development environment, really is a framework and a mapping of established, repeatable, and disciplined processes for project development that is consistent with professional commercial practices. Now, why does this matter in a presentation that's ostensibly about technology? We're going to get to that, but I do encourage you to examine both of these documents. The NREL document, which is around since 2013, is at the link that is shown, and you will get these presentations, so the links will be available to you. And the CCREE's own document that iterates on the work that NREL did can be found on our website. Just go and search for SROPTIC with 2 T's and 2 C's. We do like inelegant acronyms sometimes, but such as the ninja of the business. Now, there are two frameworks, the first and the second. In terms of the project motivation, you might say BEPTIC. And in terms of the project development framework, you have SROPTIC. When you're talking about your motivation, you have to think about your baseline, your economics, the policy environment you exist in, the technology environment that you exist in, and technology you intend to use. And you have to make sure there is consensus around the need for a project. This is what establishes whether or not there's going to be a project to happen in the first place. A good idea of how all these combine might be a statement such as, because my particular island burns a lot of fossil fuels, and because that exposes us to economic risk, and because that exposes us to environmental risk, policy has been established and there is a consensus that we need to switch to renewable energy. I think that is a fairly clear and unambiguous statement that really gives a motivation. But once you have the motivation, then you need to get a little bit deeper and talk about how the project actually happens. And as Dr. Jackson mentioned, and as Charlene mentioned, you need to think about the site, the resource that you're deploying, the offtake or the offtaker for the energy that you're purporting to either save or produce. You have to think about permits and regulation. You have to think about technology again. You have to think about the team that's going to execute, the capital you're going to use to execute, and this is what we have added as CCREEE, the construction of the actual intervention. Now you'll notice, of course, that technology pops up in both, and because the technology is really the grounding of the whole intervention, because we are deploying the technology, we're deploying infrastructure that leverages that technology. And while both of these frameworks have technology kind of as standalone, I want you all to recognize that it permeates the whole framework, right? The economics will depend on technology. Policy is often directed towards technology. Consensus is built around technology as well, in as much as there are certain technological forms that people don't want at all, but there are others that people are very, very keen upon, and you can build consensus around that. Similarly, your site is going to have the necessary resources to leverage the technology that you're talking about. If you're talking about your off-taker, you have to think about interconnection, you have to think about their demand and how the technology is going to meet their demand. Your team has to be able to to use that technology, they have to be knowledgeable, they have to have a certain level of technical competence, and the construction obviously is going to have it's going to be impacted by the technology deploying as well. So all of this to say, technology matters very, very much, and thinking clearly about the technology you're going to be using when you're developing your project is going to be absolutely critical to making sure that you have a successful project. And I can tell you, if you don't have that clarity of thoughts, you will head towards disaster. I have seen unfortunate interventions where people say they're going to get some solar and they're going to get some wind because they're tired of depending on the utility company. And there's some motivation and there's some anger, but there's not a really clear thought about the technology itself and how it's going to be deployed towards the benefit of the project proponent. And because of a particular case I can think of, a man decided that he was going to get some solar and get some wind. I have never seen those wind turbines turning, and the solar is completely oversized, and he spent a lot of money when he was trying to save money. So let us be very clear on the technology considerations before we go into a project. Now, what are some of these? Again, this is meant to be a very high level, just skimming the surface kind of view. We can get much deeper in the questions if you like, or we can spend, or you all can access some of the resources at the CKH if you want to go deeper. But this is just going to be a few of the things you have to think about for a few of the technologies that we are excited about. Firstly, let's talk about efficiency. And I always like to talk about efficiency first because, well, put it this way. If you have a very inefficient facility that you're trying to serve with energy, and your first choice is I'm going to run and throw some solar modules on it, if you haven't maximized the efficiency of that facility, then you're going to end up buying more of your renewable energy components than you need to. If you have 6 kilowatts of demand, you could buy 6 or 8 kilowatts of solar, or you could reduce that demand to maybe 3 kilowatts and then spend half as much. I think that makes a lot more sense for economic purposes and for the benefit of the project proponent. You don't want to spend more than you have to. For this reason, for any facility where you think about any energy intervention at all, think about efficiency first. An energy audit should always be your primary intervention. Think about what the needs of the facilities are in terms of both demand, in terms of when they're going to need power, and think about how you can lower that demand first or smooth out that demand before you do anything else. Usually, these sorts of energy efficiency interventions are the lowest cost and highest return option of anything you can do for a facility. While certain energy forms may take 3, 4, 5, 7 years to pay off, many of the efficiency measures I've seen in a variety of facilities will pay off in less than a year. And they need not be infrastructure heavy. There are a lot of human elements to efficiency. There are behavioral elements, getting people to turn off lights, getting people to use water differently. If you can inculcate those behavioral elements, then you've improved your efficiency. There's cultural elements as well. Some people like to keep their lights on at all time because that's just how them grow. In a certain country that I won't mention, because electricity is so cheap, there is a lot of usage of electricity in ways that in other places maybe would not fly. There are also managerial aspects to it. If you have an entity that thinks very hard about the way it uses energy and commits itself to continuous improvement, then such an entity will, over the long run, find better ways of being energy efficient, and it kind of becomes a part of the organization's mode of being. Finally, I'll mention that integrated utility services, which Charlene had mentioned, is a model that can be used to accelerate efficiency deployment, because if your utility is your ESCO, then you can do a lot more, get a lot further. But please, I cannot state this enough, efficiency is the first place you need to stop. Let's talk a little bit about solar technologies. And I will start with solar water heating. People don't often think of it very much, but to tell the truth, for many facilities, the net present value of an investment in solar water heating is much, much more than the net present value of investing in solar PV. The economics work a lot better. If you're thinking about solar technologies or solar water heating in particular, you should firstly determine a suitable site. Remember the S from SROPTIC. You want a sturdy south-facing roof. You want a lot of direct sunlight. You want to watch out for shading. You want to size it correctly. You want to make sure that you're getting enough water and there's enough water storage in the solar water heating system to serve the facility. You may need to think about whether you want to have natural circulation of the hot water or pumped circulation. And that really is a matter of the configuration of your building. If you have a very tall building, maybe you want to put something on the roof that it can flow down. If that is not possible for whatever reason, maybe you don't want anything on your roof, then you're going to have to invest in a pump, which is going to cost you some energy. Think about it when you're investing in a particular facility. If you have rebates, tax credits, and financing options, look into those. There are a lot of those for solar water heating that one can think about. Barbados has had supportive policies for solar water heating since the 70s or the 80s. In Jamaica, the National Housing Trust gives loans, cheap loans, to put solar on your own roof. So it's something that you really should look for to maximize economic benefit. One thing though, in as much as this is something that is usually roof mounted, you need to think about storm resilience. I was in Nevis the other day, and a man spoke about how during a recent storm, the tank blew right off of his system. And so he switched to a system where the tank was in his basement and he had pumped circulation. Cost him a bit more, but resilience mattered to him. Finally, maintenance. And this goes back to some of those cultural issues that we spoke about in efficiency. We don't necessarily have a culture of maintenance in this region. We don't necessarily continually look at our system to make sure they're working properly. This is a piece of plumbing, essentially. So just like any other piece of plumbing, you need to maintain it. You need to make sure you have no leaks. You need to make sure that you, from time to time, check all your fittings. So maintenance is important. Solar photovoltaics. Solar photovoltaics is another example of a fairly popular technology. Maybe the one that is getting the most public view or public press, let's say. Some of the same considerations as for hot water heating, right? You want a sturdy south-facing roof, you want direct sunlight. Resource assessments become very important. You need to think about how much insolation you're getting on your particular site, and therefore how much kilowatt hours you can think about being output. I did see a question in the chat that was interesting. There was interesting question in the chat that spoke to how do we deal with the fact that humidity, high humidity does affect solar performance in a couple of ways. One, there's more corrosion, and therefore the modules themselves might have a shorter life, and the interconnections between them have a shorter life. And sometimes if you have beading, fogging on top of the modules themselves, then you have a lowered output. Somewhat hard to deal with, but it means you should maybe size it up a little bit. Maybe also think very carefully about your maintenance regime for that system, because the failure rates may be a bit higher. I noticed that our good friend Indra Haraksing is in the audience. She is an expert on these kind of technologies. I do encourage you to connect with her, Ms. O'Neill, if you want to go a little bit deeper into this. The regulatory situation for solar photovoltaics matters as well. We have different situations in different islands. Some have a buy all, sell all system where even if you put these panels on your roof, you have to sell them directly to the utility. Other places have net billing or net metering, and other places allow you to have standalone systems. Now, understanding your regulatory situation and the interconnection requirements is going to be very important to optimizing your investment. For example, if you have a situation where you have net billing, it's probably best to size your system that you can maximally displace grid power and minimize export to the grid, because the energy that you save is worth more and priced differently than the energy that you export. As with solar water heaters, you need to think about storm resistance as well, resilience as well. And one additional environmental consideration, glare. You can, at low angles of the sun, have glare coming off of these modules that can be a problem if it's shining in somebody's face, if it's shining if it's near an airport, for instance. You don't want to have glare from the panels blinding anybody who's trying to land a plane. So think about that when you're deploying as well. It may have to be responsive to regulation in that regard as well. Wind energy, very briefly. One of the most important things to know about wind energy is that the power output is very sensitive to changes in wind speed because it varies with the cube of wind speed. That means if you double wind speed, your power output increases by 8. It means that if you have a 10% change in your wind speed, your power output could change by close to 30%. Now, because of this sensitivity, typically, if you're going to do a commercial wind farm, you're going to have to be very, very, very careful and very, very, very detailed about your modeling. Usually, nobody will finance such a project unless you have something like 18 months of detailed site measurements, because those small variations have such a very, very big effect. The orientation and arrangement of the turbines also matters as well, because if you put one turbine downwind of another, then because of the changes in pressure, because it's in the wake of the other turbine, the output of that second turbine will be affected. Now, the physics and economics of wind turbines favor larger and taller turbines for a few reasons. The higher up you go, the less turbulent the air is, the less you're affected by the roughness of the surface. And for some of the same reasons here, offshore wind is intriguing because the sea is relatively flat and smooth compared to the land. So larger, taller turbines are where the industry has been going for a while, but there's some impacts there. For smaller domestic or small commercial turbines, in my opinion, not the biggest fan of them. They give usually very wobbly output, and you're going to have to get some additional components to smooth out that output AC, because the air near the surface can be so turbulent, and usually these turbines are very big anyway. You may end up displacing some of your demand, but replacing them, not so keen on that. A lot of environmental considerations with wind turbines. Some people complain about noise, some people worry about birds, some people don't like the aesthetics. And, you know, there's merit to some of these, and some of these I think can be not so full of merit. You know, people say the noise is killing them cow and cause them to be unable to make love to them wife, those kind of things. Nevertheless, whether it's true or not, you have to address these concerns that people have. So Dr. Jackson told me something a very long time ago before CCREEE, when he was working for Wigton. One of the most important things that he did when he was making Wigton happen was to get the community on board, because you need to address some of these noise and aesthetic considerations that people will have. Otherwise, your project will be derailed. So be very careful about that in your environmental considerations. One more thing, because the economics are favoring bigger turbines, you need to think very carefully about how you're going to get your turbines and the components of your wind system to the site. Moving these huge objects by road is not a trivial matter. It requires some planning. Be very, very thoughtful about the logistics of building your wind farm. Storage technologies, really important and becoming more and more important. They have a number of use cases for them. One is smoothing out the intermittency of power that's coming from, say, solar or wind. There are arbitrage opportunities, particularly if you can charge your storage using something that is cheap, or either when power is cheap if you have a time of use situation, or using, say, zero margin renewable energy. You can also see the importance of storage technologies for resilience or backup situations. And, you know, depending on what you want your storage for, you can use different forms. You can use electrochemical, mechanical. Thermal storage has been a very, very old and well-worn technology. Basically, if you have a time of use situation in your electricity tariff, so electricity is cheap off peak at night, you freeze a bunch of ice at night, and in the daytime, you blow cool air over the ice and use that to chill your building. Quite old technology, works very well. One critical thing to think about when you're talking about storage technologies is power versus energy. Do you need your storage to be able to deliver a lot of energy over a very, very short period? Or do you want something that can deliver more modest amounts over a very long period? Depending on your off-taker and depending on the situation that you're using it, you can make very different choices with respect to your storage technology. So again, give some thought there to who your off-taker is and what their needs are. Hydroelectricity, extremely site-specific for obvious reasons. You need the right river, you might need the right valley to dam. The configuration and the turbine technology you use will depend on your site, specifically on the amount of head, the difference in height, basically, that the water is falling. Hydroelectricity can have very high environmental impact, and because of some of these many regulatory issues that you need to wrestle with, it can be expensive to build, but it's cheap to run, generally speaking. They last a very long time, and they give you some unique capabilities in your electricity system, such as black start capabilities. So hydroelectricity, it's one of the older forms of renewable energy, one of the best, but because of some of these issues of environmental impact and expense, the pace of global additions has been slowing somewhat. Electric mobility. Everyone's excited about electric vehicles, but just recognize it's more than just cars, scooters, e-bikes, those little golf carts that you see on hotel grounds. All of these can be electrified. And while they are expensive to acquire for now, electric vehicles are very, very cheap to run. The strongest business case is usually, so far from the analysis I've seen, in fleet applications. That is, if you are a person who drives your vehicle for 1 hour a day, maybe it's not worth it. But if you are running a fleet and these are very high utilization vehicles, because the savings are in terms of much, they're much cheaper to run on a per kilometer basis, and because the maintenance costs of electric vehicles are much lower because there are fewer moving parts, I think the first place you're going to see big applications of EVs will be fleets, people who are renting cars, people who are running delivery services, that sort of thing. There are also some crossover services or applications that can be considered when we're thinking about electric mobility, because essentially they're big batteries on wheels, right? So when they are interconnected to the grid, when they're connected to the grid, they can provide storage services, they can provide voltage support, grid services basically, that make them very intriguing for utility companies. They're also represent a high demand growth potential for utilities, right? Because we're talking about a structural change. The truth is, utility demand growth across the region has been more or less flat for like a decade. There's not big increases in the amount of electricity that people are using. But if you have a structural change, like people suddenly going towards electric vehicles, that is a big potential growth for utilities. And so utilities will be your partners and your champions for electric mobility projects, and you should embrace that. There are some regulatory challenges that need to be worked out, private charging networks, and how you think about self-generation or self-supply is popping up in a few places, such as Jamaica. So there are some regulatory challenges to overcome, but people are working on that. Let me run through some of the activity in the region very briefly, because I do believe I'm getting short on time. First, let's talk about regional benchmarks. In terms, the table is before you, a lot of this stuff is on the CEKH, but I do want to point out a few things. You have some regional leaders who are deploying a lot of solar, wind, hydro, and storage. And you have some good regional pipelines being developed in terms of people in diverse countries wanting to deploy a lot of solar. But one of the things that the region needs to grapple with is that our regional costs are somewhat higher than global cost benchmarks. There are a variety of reasons for this, but in my opinion, one of the main ones is that we do not necessarily have a lot of experience in deployment. The thing about technology is, if you deploy more of it, it becomes cheaper to do. Because the first time you do it, you're learning, you have to build up capacity, you're going to take a little bit longer. And not just capacity in terms of your project development team, in terms of the regulator, in terms of the policy partners that you have. Everybody's trying to work out how to do this new thing. But the second one you do is going to be easier, and the third, and the fourth, and the 100th. So as we continue to push deployment, prices will naturally fall. And it's something that we really do need to push. If there are any, I know there are certain policymakers online, rather than saying, boy, it's too expensive, let's not try, recognize that this is the way technology is moving, this is the way the world is moving, and therefore let us push deployment as much as possible, and that allows prices to fall. And we have good reasons to want to push deployment. If you look at everybody's renewable energy targets across the region, all of the countries of CARICOM, in the main, folk are very ambitious. There are several countries that want to get to 100% renewable energy by 2030. The reality is, though, that we are not on pace to meet those targets. Our ambitions and our levels of deployment don't quite match, which is unfortunate. We need to be doing more as countries, as people, as business leaders, to push the envelope on getting renewable energy and energy efficiency deployed in a big way in the region, because it is to our benefit, because we are going to be freeing ourselves from importation of fossil fuels, we're going to be doing good things for our environment, and we're going to be embracing the technology of the future rather than clinging to the past. Again, our country trajectories are going to have to really pick up the pace if people are going to meet the targets that they say they want to meet. And we're talking about compound annual growth rates of renewable energy technology that exceed historic levels. But we're making history here. So we have to do more than we ever have if we're going to get to the future that we want. Truth is, though, one thing to point out, the right technology mix is an open question. A lot of places have said we're going to go to 100% renewable energy, but we're not quite sure yet what that 100% is going to be comprised of, and that's okay. It's happened to other places in the world in the same sort of way. You set high targets and then you figure out how you're going to get there, but the work of figuring it out is what we all have to be engaged in a serious way. In terms of energy efficiency policy, most of the activity in the region is focused around tax exemptions and demonstration projects, and that's good. It's somewhat easy to administer from a government perspective, but I would argue that we need to do a bit more work in terms of energy efficiency standards, in terms of labeling standards, in terms of requirements for people to use technology. If you just drop the price and then leave it to the consumer, you'll get so far and no further. But if you implement building codes, if you implement labeling standards, and as Barbados has recently done, efficiency standards for bulbs coming into the country, then it no longer is left to the adventurous consumer to make something happen. It really becomes part of the way the market operates. And that is really, in my opinion, a better way to make things happen. And we do need to make things happen, make no mistake. Decarbonization of energy systems is driven by economics because of the way most of our islands depend on expensive fossil fuel generation, not all of them, but also by environmental imperatives. The irrefutable fact is, if the world continues to burn carbon fuels, then we are going to create carbon dioxide that will enter the atmosphere, and it will change the chemistry of the planet in ways that are not helpful for us. So fly high or fly low, everybody across the world eventually needs to get towards renewable energy, towards a low carbon energy, if we're going to have the planet we want. Now, that said, if we small islands decide that we're going to make mitigation commitments, it probably doesn't matter too much because we are so small. We're not going to change the world or change the chemistry of the atmosphere single-handedly. The Chinas and the Americas and the Europes of the world do much more than we can. But that said, when we do make mitigation commitments through our nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, we send signals to our negotiating partners and to our funders. We say, this is what we intend to do. Please make those resources available. We can drive national policy forward with those commitments. And typically the things that we want to do come with useful co-benefits, such as better air quality, such as displacing importation of fuels in terms of insulating ourselves from commodity price fluctuations. So it's worth doing. CARICOM countries generally have ambitious NDCs in line with their ambitious policies. But that said, if the energy transition and climate adaptation are not justly funded, some CARICOM countries will continue to take a high carbon development pathway. I can never tell Guyana not to drill for oil, for instance, because it is changing their economy in a fundamentally good way. I can't argue with Mia Motley when she said that if you negotiating partners do not help us to transition in a meaningful way, then we may drill for oil here, because people need to develop, people need to get money for their populations, and it is understandable. So climate justice in terms of the persons or the countries who created this problem needing to come forward with the resources to help solve the problem is something that needs to be front and center. Very finally, in terms of where you can find support, the first place I'll tell you to get support, get it from the CCREEE. We have the PPF. We also have modeling services, data services, analysis, GIS. We do training. There's plenty of technical support available here. Also, national and regional development banks are in on the game. Private finance, including commercial banks, venture capitalists, bilateral aid agencies are all sources of both technical and project finance support. And there's a whole list of them here. I won't bother going into it in too much detail, but you'll get the slides later so you can see some of the players within the region. And this list is growing all the time because of the importance of the climate fight. So there's plenty of support out there for you project developers. Make sure you tap into it. I'll pause there. Thank you for your time. Sorry for going a little bit long. And I suppose we can take a few questions now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerald. Very passionate presentation. I think you started off by mentioning project motivation as an essential and fundamental component of project development. And I most certainly hope, and from my end, I do admit that this presentation is itself very motivating. We are going to pause at this point from presentations, and we will invite our participants continue posing questions in the Q&A function. We are going to take some of these questions, but there are a few requests coming through in the chat. Just to reiterate, my colleagues have responded. The session is being recorded. It is live on YouTube and will be available via YouTube link. And all resources, including presentations, will be shared with participants. On that note, I also ask you to pay attention to your email inboxes, because you should have already received a project concept template that we will use throughout the next 3 days in building your capacity and in this training towards developing robust project concept documents. Now I'm going to take some of the questions in the chat, and then we go back to some of what Jerry has presented, and in fact it has been quite a rich presentation, and it's, I think, again, very important for us to note that when we say sustainable energy, there are so many dimensions, so many technologies that can be considered, and that while we can look at a general approach to sustainable energy project development, we notice that across the varying technologies, there are nuances that must be taken into account, and Gerald was able to walk us through technology by technology, what some of these are, and the considerations that you need to bear in mind as you develop your project concepts. Of course, this list presented by Gerald is by no means exhaustive, but we have selected these technologies based on the applications that we've received in the project preparation facility, and also through our own expertise and interaction with the region, understanding the regional context. I see the first question we have is a question in Spanish, obviously evidence of our diversity in the Caribbean and globally, that we have a number of our member states, and the first language is not English. So that question is, que si tenemos las presentaciones en español, desafortunadamente no las tenemos en español, pero es algo que podemos pensar para próximos eventos. Essentially, I have confirmed that unfortunately we do not have these presentations in Spanish, but we will surely take that into consideration for future events, of course, resources permitting. I think Gerald touched on the second question, but just for the benefit of others, looking at the technicalities around solar PV, and for sure solar PV is, and Gerald, you may just chime in, solar PV being one of the more popular ones that we know in the region. Again, a technology that is quite mature, and what I can say is that it has seen significant advancement in design and technology. So it's very frequent that you hear that efficiency of panels, for example, are increasing, and that panels are now designed to take into account some of this issues, be it the sea blast or high humidity. But again, I really do love this question, because these are some of the things that must be thought about as you design your project. It's not simply saying, okay, I can just go online, connect with a supplier in China or the US and just order in solar panels and put them on my roof. So even the technical issues, that comes under your pre-feasibility and feasibility studies. Gerald, I know you addressed it. Is there anything else you wish to add to that?
Well, just to add that, I believe IEEE was developing standards for module performance in high humidity environments or high temperature environments. And you know, it's obviously a problem, and the manufacturers are aware of that. And as you said, technology is improving. But you know, as much as we are technology takers and not technology makers, we just have to include that in the development process. We need to think about, okay, maybe we're going to have higher failure rates, maybe we're not going to have as good performance, and we need to make adjustments for that in the design.
All right, thanks, Gerald. We're going to move on to the next question, and it is, how well is CCREEE working with other partners who are already delivering these related and similar services in the region? And some examples are given. And I will say that there's still quite a bit of space for support in project development. And if there wasn't, we surely would have met our targets by now. CCREEE, and I think from the presentation or the opening remarks given by our executive director, he did mention the 5P principle, where he focused on projects, partnerships and people and among others. And CCREEE has, through its inception, from its inception to now, focused a lot on partnerships. We understand that, you know, all hands must be on deck. CCREEE has formed very formal partnerships and practical partnerships, for example, with CDB, with 5Cs, and we constantly work with some of these entities, with IDB. So it definitely is not far from the truth that CCREEE is already ensuring that our work aligns. We definitely do not believe in duplication, but what's important is bringing our work together and complementing work programs for the benefit of the Caribbean people. And I want to stress that at the end of the day, we're heading towards achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which is affordable, sustainable, reliable access to electricity and energy services for all, not just for some, but for all. And with that approach, partnerships are important. In fact, the project preparation facility was established through a partnership support through GIZ, the Government Development Corporation, TAPSEC for one, and TAPSEC is a GIZ funded program and project that has been operating in the region for the last 2-3 years. And PFAN, and PFAN is supported by UNIDO. So most certainly, partnerships is at the center of all that we do.
Yeah, and let me add as well that you know, one needs to understand one's lane, and one needs to understand one's strengths, right? And when we partner, we're always looking for new partners. We're always willing to sign new partnership agreements. We do so leveraging our particular niche and a particular skill. So CCREEE has a lot of strength in terms of the technical staff that it has. It has a lot of strength in terms of the amount of data that it has as well. We don't necessarily have the biggest strengths in financing. We know about it, but we're not bankers here, right? So when we partner, we might partner with a financial institution. They would take care of the financing side. We would do the technical analysis side, and you know, together we make good soup.
Thanks, Gerald. And so the last question that I see in the Q&A platform is a very practical and relevant question, and it relates to electric mobility. And the question is, how well do electric vehicles cope with floods? And let me just say that the electrocution risk of electric vehicles is quite low, and that is because your high voltage EV battery is isolated from your chassis, and therefore that makes the electrocution risk very low. And by design, electric vehicles have been designed and continue to be designed with that in mind, and making all of these risks low.
Yeah, that you don't want to drive any vehicle through a flood, electric or no, right? Because even very low levels of water can float and push around a vehicle. But remember that internal combustion engine, naturally aspirated, it has an air intake, it has some tubes, and then there's an exhaust, right? So there's a very convoluted but open tube running through the whole device. So you put that in water, water gets in, and you have problems. Electric vehicles, the battery packs are sealed and waterproof. You can have water getting into some of the electrical components, right? Or some of the joints and the connections, and especially if it's salt water, you might get some corrosion. So again, you don't want that, but the same thing can happen with an ICE vehicle as well. So I'd say that electric vehicles probably do somewhat better than ICE vehicles in flood situations, but you don't want to be in a flood situation anyway, you chop it.
All right, so Gerald, I think we still have 4 minutes that we could take questions, and we do have an additional question, Gerald, that I will pose to you, and that question is, how is the deployment of combined systems in the region, for example, solar, wind, biomass?
Like hybrid systems? I don't have enough data to comment intelligently, unfortunately. I've heard of and seen 1 or 2 hybrid projects, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily very highly deployed. I think that for hybridization, generally speaking, you need to think very carefully about the individual offtake or project site. And so it's a bit more of a specialized application. I think solar PV, by comparison, you can throw modules up almost anywhere. Hybrid situations are more specialized applications for very specific sites. So again, there's not a lot of volume for me to speak on. At least not that I know. Other people may know more than me.
Thank you, Gerald. And as we close off this presentation and our opening remarks and we move on, I just want to again remind our participants, if you have specific questions, you may have project concepts that you're working on, please send your questions through. We are offering an additional service, a help desk service, until Friday of this week. Now, Gerald made a very important point that if you don't go through this process of conceptualizing your project in a manner that increases your success rate, you may end up spending more money while you try to save money. But what I also want to add to that is you may end up spending more time when you try to save time or cut through certain processes. So understanding this project conceptualization process, we really cannot skip over that and try to go into simply just procuring and developing a project. So I see that we have 2 additional questions, and because we have 1 minute left, we will take them. I believe question number 1 is on pumped hydro storage. Is there an example of this in the region? Now, Gerald, I'll field that question to you, obviously, because you're our presenter here at this point. I do know that Barbados, at the time of looking at the 100% transition, had done a study, and a site was chosen for the pumped hydro storage. And we know of great examples in other parts of the world, including pumped hydro storage. I believe in Japan that makes use of the ocean as the bottom basin. So Gerald, over to you. In the Caribbean context, is there any example that you can mention?
Not that I know of. If you want to broaden the region a bit to include Latin America, there are some, I think Argentina, Brazil might have 1 or 2. So there you have a few. The thing about pumped hydro is because it is so very dependent on a particular geography, it's idiosyncratic in a way. Good technology, well established, but you're going to have very site-specific examples. In the less than a minute, let me run through a couple more that I see. How do electric vehicles perform on steep hills? Just fine. Electric motors get very high torque, so going up, not that much of a problem, especially if you have good tires, and going down, you can recharge your batteries through regenerative braking. With respect to available data for electric buses and bus fleet feasibility, Barbados has been doing quite a bit. I know that they've been sharing that experience. They shared some of it with Jamaica, who is also about to do a pilot for electric buses. So there is data available, and more coming out day by day.
Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, participants, for your questions. We hope that they have been answered to your satisfaction. Now, we've spoken about the need for project development support. We've looked at the technologies. And so that case well made that, it is justified that we pay attention to project development. We want to narrow in a bit on the services that the CCREEE project preparation facility provides and the application process, how you could access these services. To deliver that presentation, I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Safia Vital. That's Miss Safia Vital, who is our sustainable junior engineer, and she is a PPF team member, but contributes to other programs within the CCREEE. Safia, over to you, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So yes, I will be sharing a presentation today on our evaluation and application process within the project preparation facility. So I am just going to share my screen. So yes. So today, just a brief overview of my presentation. We're looking at the specifics, some of our specific services within the PPF, looking at project eligibility, the evaluation criteria, the evaluation process that we use, as well as a more detailed look at the application process. So in terms of the services we offer, Charlene would have touched on it broadly in her presentation, and we do offer really and truly a broad range of services, technical assistance, advisory, financial matchmaking. So on screen here, you will see an example of some of the specific services. So for example, technical and commercial design, pre-feasibility assessments, feasibility studies, off-take agreements, facilitation of permitting processes, stakeholder management, due diligence facilitation. So it's very much broad. So we can really come in and provide support where needed. In terms of what makes a project eligible, we have 4 broad areas of eligibility. So in terms of country, we do support CARICOM member states specifically. In terms of organizations, it's quite broad. So it's private sector, public sector, also mixed capital companies or public-private partnerships, as well as NGOs. In terms of project stage, we do support projects across the broad spectrum of project development. So from early stage pre-feasibility projects all the way up to a project that might just need assistance with financial matchmaking if they're close to financial close. And then of course, anywhere in the middle with assistance with studies, environmental and social impact assessments, technical engineering design, and so forth. And in terms of technology, we support a very broad range of technologies, both renewable energy and energy efficiency. So some of the technologies that Gerald went through, so solar, wind, hydro, e-mobility as well, energy efficiency, as well as some of the more emerging technologies, so ocean tech, hydrogen storage, and we also provide support for geothermal, biomass. So it's really quite a long list. And you can find the extensive list on our website, which is www.ccree.org/PPF. So you can see that full list of technologies that we support. And I also think it's good to note that we like to see nexus applications. So for example, in the water sector, with the waste sector, sustainable buildings, we do support those projects as well. So the next question you may ask is, what does the PPF look for in a project? So broadly speaking, we ask these questions as we go through the evaluation process. Is the project commercially viable? Is there a real value proposition? Is it technically viable? Does it work technically? How does the management team operate? Do we get the impression that this team can achieve their plans, the goals that they set out to do? And of course, is it financially viable? Does this project sound like it could generate a return for investors, for the project owners? And within this broad construct, and my colleagues have spoken about ShopTake quite a bit, and we do use this in our evaluation process as well. So at the minimum, we hope that projects have a site identified and that they have done some sort of resource assessment, even if that's preliminary, and that they have chosen a technology. So these are the three fields that are very critical. And any information in terms of off-takers, in terms of permits and their understanding of that process, the team, that of course boosts applications. Capital is not necessary that projects have capital already identified. This is one of our core services. And in terms of the construction, engineering, procurement, and construction EPCs, we do also provide management of those processes. And then we go on to, you have all your ducks in a row, you're ready. How do you apply for the PPF? So these are the four main steps. You register with our website here on screen, you create an account, you navigate the application portal, and you submit your application. So I'm just gonna go through now each of these four steps to give you a bit of a more in-depth understanding of what you will see. So in terms of registering to the PPF, if you go on our website, www.ccree.org/PPF, you will see this how to apply section and the register button. Once you click register, you'll be guided to our registration page, which you can fill out. It's pretty simple. And from there, you'll be guided to create an account with our platform, which is a Climate Invest platform. And once you have created an account, you will gain access to the actual application portal, which looks like this when you first land. And in here, you can add all your information. If you can see here on the left, at the bottom, there's the new application button that you would click, and it will take you to the online application form where you will be asked to fill in these information. So you'll be asked to fill in information about your organization, point of contact, give an overview of your project. So in terms of the total cost, the location, the target market, commercial arrangements, the project benefits, the project size, the status of your project, your development needs in terms of the amount of money, the investment that is required, and the purpose of the investment. You would also need to fill out the technology that you will be using. And then importantly, we asked you to attach some documentation. So an executive summary, as well as a project concept / proposal, which is really the purpose of why we're here today, to go through crafting that project concept. And as an option, you can also attach an economic model. But because of the range of projects that we support from very early stage, we understand that the economic model might not be 100% done, so it's an option. So then now you have submitted your application, you fill in all the information, you've attached your project concept. What should you expect? So there are three possible outcomes. Your project can be accepted into the PPF, and we will have follow-on conversations with you on, how we provide services and iron out all the details. It may be rejected, unfortunately, and also it could be sent back. And this has happened in a number of cases where an application might be sent and there's a little bit of information that is missing. And what we do is we make that clear, we give feedback, and we send that back to applicants so that you can add that information and send it back to us. And within this process too, we do at times need to reach out and have meetings with project applicants just to discuss their project, gain any clarity that is needed to support us deciding to take on your project. So this is an overview of the evaluation and application process. Thank you very much. Over to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Sophia. And to support Sophia's presentation, we have included in the chat some of the links that you could access, a link to register your project. And we do encourage you not just to register, but to submit complete project application. So registration just being the first step. There's a guidance document that is also available. So if you click these links, you can access that guidance manual. Sophia, I invite you to stay on for this section as we open to questions. And I do see questions already. I'm noting that there's one in the chat, and then we encourage participants to please post your questions in the Q&A. You can continue, of course, your very lively and interesting discussions in the chat. But if you have questions that you would like to be answered by our presenters, please post in the Q&A using the Q&A function. So in the chat, that question is, what are the anticipated costs of the PPF in terms of the overall CapEx? I imagine that this question really refers to the CapEx of various technologies. If I am correct, that will be presented in detail as we go through the training, so that at the end of the training, participants have a very good idea of what these CapEx costs are based on the technologies that will be employed in their particular projects. I see we do have another question in the chat. Is there a project concept template? Please check your emails. We have shared with you the project concept template, along with a case study that will be used to go through that template as we train you on how to develop the concept template. As we start the segments that look at the template, we will also post the documents in the chat. In case you're unable to access it via email, please send us an email or just let us know in the chat that you're having difficulty to access it. I'll move over to the Q&A, and I see a few questions. Sophia, I'm going to pass on some to you. I'll just take the first one, which is, what's the best way to do a financial and commercial assessment when a project is for social development or economic development? And I imagine that your question relates to, what if your project is not generating revenue that makes it attractive on the commercial front? CCREEE will support projects. So the final aim is not only to have a project that generates revenue, of course, that has its place, but there are cases where there are projects that are or will be developed for social development. And so one of our services would be economic modeling. And understanding the numbers we can only do if we go through that process. And so that's a service that will also be offered. So Sophia, I see we have a question here. Can you submit any project proposal for funding through the CCREEE?
So I would say to this question, so one of the key services that we offer at the PPF is financial matchmaking. So if your project proposal is in renewable energy efficiency, meets the eligibility criteria, you can come to us with that, and we will work with our various partners. For example, we work with the CRAF out of the CARICOM Development Fund, which provides guarantees for loans, and other type of more financially based partners that we work with to try to seek funding for applicable projects.
Okay, and I think our next question, Dr. Harak Singh has asked, does the project have to be a large-scale project for it to be considered? So what is the scale of the projects that the CCREEE will provide support to?
So it doesn't have to be large scale. We also provide support to small scale projects. We don't have a particular lower cap in terms of capacity, but in terms of investment, the lower cap is $250,000 US dollars in terms of investment. So when you translate that, it's not a very large project at all, as we try to be very inclusive to our small and medium-sized enterprises.
And Sophia, the next question to you is, what is the maximum amount available in funding?
So I don't think we have a maximum. Charlene, you can correct me. But yeah, so maybe the bigger the better, but yeah.
Yes, I can chime in. I'll also mention the next question, because I'll probably take these two together. And the next one is, what is the cost of the PPF service? Is it a percentage of the overall project CapEx, or is it a free service? And so to the first question on what is the maximum amount available in funding, I just again want to stress that the facility provides technical support. And included in that technical support would be matchmaking, so that your project, we can match your project to investment. So in terms of what we provide, it is not that CCREEE comes in to necessarily provide you with funding to go through the project development phase, but we work with you throughout the development phase, and our services are bespoke. So it ranges from standard services to bespoke services. In terms of the CapEx, or whether it's a free service, it really depends on the details of your project. So I think what I wanted to leave with you is that I would like for us to recognize that the resources that CCREEE puts into your project, and it may be that it's human resources. These technical services basically can amount to equity in our project. And so there are various models that we use to be able to find a way to monetize some of the services that we provide. So it is not necessarily a free service, but we have been very creative in how we can work with you to the benefit of both parties. And so again, on that point, it really is important that you're able to conceptualize that project, that we can clearly see these projects, because as we evaluate, the projects are going to be evaluated on a project-by-project basis. And so we employ flexibility in how these projects are evaluated. Okay, Sophia, some more questions for you. Is there a deadline for submitting project proposals? And secondly, how quickly can applicants expect feedback after submitting a proposal?
So currently we have a rolling submission process. So there's no deadline. We're just open to applications. And in terms of the length of time, approximately 1 to 2 months, you would be able to hear back from us.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Moving on to the next question, are PV projects also allowed for submission for funding?
Yes, so that falls within the technologies that we provide support for and the services that we offer.
And to comment too on the scale of the project, you would have heard that we provide services ranging from smaller projects to larger utility scale projects. And yes, arrangement would be a PPA. The facility also provides services in developing that project. There is a question, in how many years would an investor expect a return on investment? Over to you, Sophia.
I was going to ask if you want to take that one.
Okay, I mean, for me, this is, I'll give the simpler answer. It really depends on the project, it depends on the technology. But again, our services would help to assess the economic viability. And so these are some of the metrics, the project metrics that would come out of some of the analyses that we do at the facility. Sophia, the next question is the CCREEE project preparation facility, I imagine, provide funding for social impact management projects in our communities and schools. For example, solar installation at our schools to help mitigate black carbon. Will investors consider climate impact projects that have no return on investment?
I think this is an interesting question, particularly because we really like projects that have a strong social benefit. And I think in this instance, what the PPF can do is look into more grant funding to see, what can be provided to help such a project. And I think there are many donors that are interested in this type of work.
And I would just add again that through our partnerships, we have a number of organizations that are focused on climate change, and there is no delineating and excluding climate or making that distinction between climate change projects and energy. The link is very evident, quite intrinsic. And so through our partnerships, for example, with the 5 Cs, projects that relate to climate impact are definitely accepted through the facility. And I believe the last question that I see here on the Q&A platform is it when a project is rejected, the company can resubmit that project after reviewing and altering it? So Sophia, it would be good perhaps to let participants know a few of the scenarios. If that project comes in and it's immediately accepted, what happens if it is immediately rejected, and why would it be immediately rejected? And if not, is there opportunity for dialogue with the applicant and guidance as to how that application can be resubmitted, and would it therefore be reconsidered?
Sure. So as I had mentioned in my presentation, we really have 3 options. Your project could be automatically accepted. It could be rejected. From our experience so far, projects that are immediately rejected are often those that are not eligible. So for example, they may be focused on implementing a project that is not in the Caribbean community. But in many instances, if there's missing information or something is, can be added, we would send it back with feedback so that projects can look over, they can add the information, they could do any needed research they need to do, and then they can send it back to us. And within that process, a number of times we have had communications or conversations with these projects to really fully explain, okay, this is what was missing, this is what we would like, and this is how you can bridge those gaps. So, yeah.
Thanks for that, Sophia. I hope that has cleared the air. I see another question here. Does the scope of the PPF include support to projects that are designed to demonstrate novel renewable energy technology? So does the CCREEE PPF support emerging technologies in its project preparation facility?
So we do accept emerging technologies. We have had applications, for example, in terms of ocean technology. So that is something that we look at. And as Sherilyn mentioned, it's really a case-by-case basis. So as we get the projects, we evaluate, we discuss with the applicants, and we see what's possible.
And our team monitoring the chat has signaled to me that there is a question on projects. What about projects that can educate individuals on renewable energy? Can that be proposed as well for support through the PPF?
That's an interesting question. I don't think we haven't gotten a project of that nature as yet, but I do think it's interesting, and I do see the connections. Again, I would shoot this one over to Charlene. I think that we would, include such a project.
It's interesting indeed, Sophia. I would say to Lauren that it would be good to have an idea of the scope of that project. So perhaps, if you could shoot us an email at ppf@CCREEE, that's 2 C's, 1 R, EEE.org, and we could look at that particular case in more detail. Another question on screen, Sophia, and remember Gerald would have proposed or presented on a number of technologies. And when we think of sustainable energy, I think we typically think about energy efficiency in terms of light bulbs, LED lights, and your energy management systems in buildings, and solar and wind, and the more conventional technologies. But Gerald did mention e-mobility. And in fact, in the Caribbean, the transport sector is one of the higher consumers of energy. And so a very pertinent question here, are projects in carbon capture or decarbonizing transport acceptable?
Simply, I would say yes. And I think too, in terms of decarbonizing transport, we look at sustainable transport broadly. So to encompass all that could mean. So yeah, simply, I would say yes.
Thank you, Sophia. And the next question is, are projects in CARICOM associate member states eligible? We do encourage associate member states to submit their project applications. They will be accepted by the facility, of course, if they qualify. And I am seeing no further questions at this time. I believe there is a question. I am not too sure of that question. I'm not understanding the first part, but there is a question. Do you have a direct link, or are we using YouTube? This is being streamed live on YouTube, and the link will be provided to participants, along with all of the other resources that are going to be used in this training. Now, I know we've been doing a lot of talking, and you've been participating through the live Q&A platform, and I really appreciate that. There seems to be a lot of interest in sustainable energy, a lot of folks on the ground really moving towards that transition that is so dire. So let me take the opportunity to thank the presenters in this morning's session, our Executive Director, Dr. Gary Jackson, who has taken CCREEE through its first operational phase as the director from 2018 to present. My colleague, our partner and the team lead from TAPSEC. Again, TAPSEC is the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, and has been instrumental in supporting the CCREEE and other organizations that are engaged in the energy transition. And then we heard from Mr. Gerald Lindo, the sustainable energy expert at the CCREEE, and you just heard from Ms. Sophia Vital, sustainable energy engineer with the CCREEE, and Sophia presenting us with important details on how you could access support at the CCREEE PPF. Now, at this time, I think it's important. I'm seeing some of the names coming up in the chat, some of the names I know, but as we move into the template and we try to tailor the training to suit the needs of all who are present, it would be really good to understand who is in the room. So we're going to launch our first poll. And I encourage you, it's simply a click. We don't require you to do too much. So on screen, you should see poll number 1 as we try to ascertain which country you're joining us from. Now notice this poll has been split into 2 questions. It is simply because we did have a limitation on the number of options. So if you don't see your country in question number 1, please proceed to question number 2. And we're going to allow you just about 1 minute. So question number 1 includes some of our CARICOM member states, and question number 2 continues with that list. And if you are not from any of the CARICOM member states, you do have the option of picking the Caribbean country. Okay, so I'm seeing note in the chat, we do have a technical matter with the poll, so we're going to relaunch that poll a little later. Apparently you have to select an answer for both questions, and then that will not give us the right results for the poll. So just flagging that for my colleagues on the back end, and they are already promising me that they're taking care of that. At this point, I invite you just for 5 minutes to take a breather, stand up, shake your leg as we get ready to dive into this project concept development template, what the template represents, what the sections are, how is it helpful in that project initiation and planning phase, how does it support us so that we can support your projects, how does that robust concept document that you will be able to, at the end of the 3 days, fill in effectively, how will that lead you to being better able to access financing and investment for your sustainable energy projects. Thank you so much for being here with us. We encourage you to stay on. And so we will just play some videos while you are away on a break, grab a coffee, grab some water, and we see you in 5 minutes.
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar What would you do if you could harness the energy of the sun? Well, with a solar photovoltaic or solar PV system, you can convert the energy from the sun's rays into usable electricity, making these systems an ideal renewable energy source for the Caribbean region. Use of sustainable energy such as solar PV systems helps us to reduce our use of fossil fuels.
thereby also reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. These systems help us to not just save our planet, but also save money. In the long run, solar PV systems contribute to increased cost savings, especially when paired with energy efficiency measures. Which system type is right for me? Where regulations allow, you may choose an on-grid or grid-tied system. With a grid-tied system, the energy generated is not stored, but instead is used to offset energy requirements at your home or business, helping to reduce electricity costs, with any excess energy being fed back into the local power grid, typically in exchange for credit on your utility bill. These benefits make grid-tied systems an attractive option, especially for business owners who use energy when the PV system is producing the most, thus maximizing savings. With off-grid systems, however, the system is not connected to the local grid, and any excess energy generated is stored in batteries for later consumption. This makes these systems much better suited for isolated areas that may be difficult to connect to the municipal power grid, and can make your facility resilient to power outages, but this may come with additional costs, requirements, and restrictions. Selecting the right system for you depends on your needs. It is important to understand your local laws and operating standards, establish your energy needs, an appropriate budget for installation and maintenance, and assess the structural integrity and safety of your property before installing a solar PV system. A consultation with a local professional is essential in order to determine which system best suits you. For additional information on solar PV systems, please visit www.ccree.org.
The CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code was developed to help property developers increase the energy efficiency and the upgradability of their building projects. Energy savings help offset the potential higher cost of building your home to code. And enhanced upgradability helps commercial owners increase their competitive advantage, saving money over time. Additionally, lower energy demands during and after the building process can also lead to community and national level benefits like reduced reliance on fossil fuel generated electricity across the construction industry and in homes, lower national fuel import bills, which can free up funding for other critical areas of investment, and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So do the maths, play the long game, and help build towards a better future today. For more information on the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code, visit energy.crosq.org.
Much like with conventional cars, the way you drive your electric vehicle, or EV, impacts how it consumes energy and performs. Additionally, most modern EVs have multiple driving modes to help you adapt the vehicle to driving conditions, allowing you to conserve battery power or otherwise enhance driving performance, all with the push of a button. Regenerative braking helps you recharge your battery, so smooth, gradual braking helps maximize charging and avoids wasting energy. While planning your route and driving at steady speeds, up to 50 miles per hour, help maximize efficiency and range, entertainment systems and features such as climate control do require additional power and therefore can impact your EV's range. Parking your EV in a garage or other shaded areas can help avoid decreasing its driving range and long-term battery life. Additionally, by ensuring that tires are well inflated and that your EV is otherwise properly maintained, you can maximize your range per charge and extend the life of your EV. Better efficiency, lower fuel and energy costs, and fewer emissions make an EV an ideal choice for your mode of transportation.
For more information on electric vehicles, visit www.ccree.org.
And welcome back, participants, to training on project concept development for sustainable energy projects. Thank you for sticking with us. At this point, we move right along into our agenda. And we've heard about the project preparation facility. We've looked at things from a technology standpoint. And you know, when you decide to pursue a project, there are very important activities that must be performed in that very initial stage of developing your project. We've heard about all the justifications for developing projects. And as we do, and typically a project helps to solve a problem. Determining what that problem is, why it should be solved, and how it should be solved must be included in your project conceptualization. So to deliver the next presentation, is Ms. June Allais. Ms. June Allais has a Bachelor of Science degree in Social Sciences and Computer Programming, and a Master's of Arts degree in Economics with a focus on development banking. She currently serves as Business Climate Reform and Innovation Coordinator with the Complete Caribbean Partnership Facility. And that is a partnership between the Inter-American Development Bank, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and the Caribbean Development Bank, along with the Government of Canada. Ms. Allais is highly experienced and results-focused as she operates as a development management expert with extensive experience dealing with ministers of government, public and private sector officials, and community organizations at all levels. She possesses a solid and diverse background in providing technical support with strong emphasis in procurement planning and management, mainstreaming inclusiveness, trade and development, micro and small enterprise development, governance, human capacity development, planning, management and monitoring, and evaluation of social sector programs. She has extensive experience in working collaboratively with multiple partners and stakeholders, handling multilateral and bilateral donor-funded projects and programs, and in presenting results of fund operations and multiple partner programs. So we did have some discussions in the chat about the social development aspect of projects, and therefore it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Allais at this point to deliver her presentation.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Now, I came in early so that I could listen to the previous presentations just to get an idea. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer. So I'm going to speak basically with regard to how do you understand, identify and understand the problem and ensure that you have as much information as possible so that you are able to present the information in the manner that the funder would like the information presented in, and then to access resources. So the key is understanding the opportunity or problem and ensuring.
Ms. Allais, before you continue, could you just put that presentation in presentation mode, in presenter mode, please?
Perfect. Apologies.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So understanding the opportunity or problem. The situation, and it is in the conduct of a situation analysis, and this comprises needs assessment, stakeholder analysis, and what I'm going to accentuate here today, the problem analysis, and additionally, the assessment of the organizational capacity. Also understanding where assistance is available in areas where you do not have the necessary capacity. Okay, so the purpose of the situation analysis is to identify the problems and or opportunities in the project's focus area. So you want to identify the causes of the problem or the capacity and the capacity or constraints to take advantage of opportunities and develop solutions to resolve the existing situations or take advantage of opportunities. Now, in this presentation, Gerald mentioned sometimes you make a decision and this is not necessarily the best decision because you did not examine all the pertinent information. So just want to accentuate again, in the conduct of the situation analysis, it is conducted by using data, and some examples of data: national statistics, research reports, research projects, national plans and policies, international agreements. And I think the previous speakers mentioned the Paris Accord and some of the NDC targets that have been adopted, very ambitious targets adopted by Caribbean countries. We also want to look at demand and use studies, GIS data, technology studies, survey results, and land use data. Okay, the situation analysis has three main elements: the data analysis and participatory assessment. Now, it is important to really do an extensive participatory assessment. Reason being that sometimes we draw conclusions or make assumptions, and it is not necessarily the case. And I believe that Gerard also highlighted in his presentation the need to understand the culture, the setting, that type of thing, so that you design the project in such a way that so that there is uptake. Additionally, we want to do a very thorough problem opportunity analysis. And we also want to look at the energy users and providers, stakeholders analysis. Now, this is very important. You want to look at the users, you as the user of the system, and also understand the provider and what they're able to provide. Now, again, why is the situation analysis important? Because we can't get to the concept note if we do not really have a thorough understanding of the situation. What are the problems or what are the issues you would like to solve? And what are the opportunities that would provide us with the necessary resources to address the problem? So what we want to do is to demonstrate the logical link between the identified problem or problems and their causes. So it may not be that you want to switch, as he was mentioning, whether you go solar or what you do, whether it is appropriate. So we need to really understand the appropriateness of the solution. We also want to, in the situation analysis, to understand and elaborate the opportunity. And Sophia gave us quite a bit of detail with regard to the opportunity for financing or the opportunity for the project preparation facility, and then the matching and the matching services. So additionally, in the situation analysis, we want to set out the problem or opportunity. And I go back again to some of the key items that were mentioned by Gerald. We want to look at the economic, the technological, the cultural, and or the social context, and we want to propose possible strategies. Now, this is very important in getting to, what is the best solution for the problem. And this is why it is very critical that you understand all those components of the problem or opportunity. Additionally, the situation analysis will provide information and analysis on policy, the institutional framework, and the existing infrastructure. Additionally, it will identify potential risks and also provide justification to a donor for financing of the project. Okay, and some key aspects of data types and some examples specifically relating to renewable energy are geospatial data, looking at land use, population, forests, terrain, elevation. We also want to look at the renewable energy resource data, looking at wind speed, solar irradiance, and relating to biomass, ocean data, if possible, as well. Okay, now opportunities. Now, this may be a little dated, but increase in energy demand for Caribbean countries was estimated to be growing at the rate of 3.7% annually. And this was back in 2018. And the expectation was that demand was going to increase was going to double by 2018. Now, from what I learned earlier from Gerald, this seems to have flattened, and now we have a sort of consistent level of demand. Okay, additionally, there's tremendous potential for solar and wind energy, and this is reflected in some of the statistics I have here, where the annual solar irradiation, which is the power received from the sun in a certain area, ranges from 1,700 to 2,300 kilowatt hours per meter squared in the Caribbean, and the wind velocity 5 to 9 miles per second. Now, the key sources of energy in the Caribbean in 2018 were, information on that relates to that about 10 or 13 of the Caribbean countries, the key source of energy was from diesel fuel. And I believe that Belize used some hydroelectric power, which I think in the main they bought from Mexico. Suriname also used some hydroelectric power, and Trinidad and Tobago was to some extent using natural gas to generate a majority of their capacity from other sources. And again, as mentioned by previous speakers, the heavy dependence of Caribbean countries on petroleum-based fuels, combined with the exorbitant cost of electricity from the use of such fuels, is a key catalyst to find renewable energy sources. Now, also want to highlight, we also need to look at what is happening with regard to how the system is being disrupted by storms and other natural disasters, and more recently, what impact will the war in Ukraine present with regard to fuels and access to diesel and other fuel. Okay, now conducting the situation analysis. The situation analysis needs to be conducted with the participation of the key stakeholders. And we also need to provide, as far as possible, sex disaggregated data to facilitate gender analysis. And this goes back to ensuring that there is inclusiveness in the design of the project. We also need to identify the constraints and opportunities that are essential to expanding and/or the use of renewable energy. So we really need to understand the issue. So therefore, we need to consult with all the various stakeholders and also to do the necessary research, because if we make decisions or design projects with limited information, it could be that the very problem we're trying to solve, we're not really solving, and we could actually end up spending more money, as mentioned by Gerald. Now, we also need to conduct a comprehensive technical potential analysis. And now, this is not my area of expertise, but I would encourage you to access the technical support mentioned by the previous speakers to ensure that you really are identifying what is the best solution for the problem you have defined. Okay, so again, in conducting the situation analysis, the data analysis should address demographics, politics, economics, production capacity, technological and sociocultural factors, as well as international and country-specific standards, regulations, and commitments. Now, during the break, we saw the presentation on the regional standards with regard to climate resilience. We also saw, and I want to emphasize the importance of understanding what are the specific standards, regulations, and commitments. And this is important as well to be able to access resources which may be conditional on the project or the proposed project meeting some national commitments relating to the use of fossil fuels and emissions. Okay, a needs assessment will facilitate better understanding of the actual and perceived needs of the target group or your potential beneficiaries. So you really need, you really need to understand the needs of the various players and also some of the attitudinal issues. I saw a question earlier posed with regard to communication and whether it supports communications on renewable energy. And I just want here to accentuate the importance of communications and public education and awareness in order to support change and cultural shifts so that your project could have success. So, I just want to make a plug for that, the importance of, because sometimes we design and we only design the technical solution, but in developing your project, and probably I would say an important piece is whether there is need to have a communications change management or behavioral change component to complement the technical solution that you are providing, so that there is the buy-in to the proposed shift in technology. Okay, now I mentioned here a participatory needs assessment, and this is advantageous for many reasons. One, it strengthens the assessment process. Two, it builds interest in the outcome of the assessment from the various stakeholders, and it also includes the eventual beneficiaries in diagnosing the problem. So if you're proposing to design a project and it's supposed to benefit some beneficiaries, it is important to include them in the conversation and the discussion, so then they would be receptive to whatever is the proposed solution. Additionally, it promotes buy-in for the results of the situation analysis and commitment to the change or new systems. Again, to stress the importance of what Gerald mentioned with regard to having this necessary buy-in to transition to the new system. Okay, some techniques of participatory assessment include interviews, observation, focus group discussions, workshops. Okay, with regard to problem and opportunity analysis, this involves careful review and analysis of the data collected. Now, I keep stressing the importance of having data and having information, because your project or your concept is only as good as the information you use to develop it. So you really need to have a detailed understanding of the problem, or sufficient understanding of the problem to prepare the concept notes to get the additional resources. And we heard Sophia mention that sometimes she needs to send projects back because additional data is information is necessary. It is very important to have some sort of database and to understand the various sources of information that could help you to tease out and to come up with the concept for your project and your renewable energy strategy. Okay, now some definitions. Now we just wanted to clarify: a problem is a matter or situation that is regarded as unwelcome or harmful, or it is very expensive and it needs to be dealt with or overcome. So very high costs for electricity, which impacts negatively the potential revenue the firm can earn, is a problem. Now, opportunities and relate to, and we heard some opportunities mentioned with regard to some of the policies that the government at Barbados had put in place with regard to the use of solar energy, so with regard to the use of energy efficient light causes. Now, causes is a fact which lead to a specific situation which exists in the organization or the firm. And we would recall that Gerald in his presentation mentioned that sometimes the cause may not be the high cost of electricity or the energy per se, but really the process. So we need to really, as he mentioned, do the energy audit as necessary, and in order to determine whether it is a faulty process and the process can be improved, and both the improvement in the process as well as probably moving to another type, moving to the use of renewable energy could address your concerns. It's important to understand, I come back to the causes, and you may, I will deal with that a bit more further on. Now, gender, and I mentioned gender here because in designing projects, we need to have an understanding of what are the specific needs of both sexes. So gender refers to the behaviors, values, and relative power and influence that society ascribes to the two sexes on a differential basis. It is an acquired identity that is learned. It changes over time and varies widely within and across cultures. Now, gender analysis asks how a particular activity, decision, or plan will affect differently men and women in areas such as access and control, labor, property ownership, information and services, etc. And the gender analysis taken at every stage of the project design. It is important, very important. So for example, if I take the fishing industry and we decide that, okay, we want to move towards using renewable energy powered vessels. Now we need to know who owns the vessels, because that could also be, that is very important in, you know, these projects. So with regard to the ownership and with regard to what roles persons play and is important if we want to address the issue of gender in the design of the project. Gender mainstreaming refers to the strategies for making women's as men's concerns and experiences an integral dimension in the design, as I mentioned previously. Okay, so the project developer uses information collected to clearly define the core problem. So we want a very clear definition of what is the problem. What are the causes and what are the effects? And we also want to establish the linear relationship between them. More commonly, the jargon that you will hear. What is the theory of change? What are we proposing to do that will change the current situation? Okay, now the problem tree steps include the identification of the problems by consulting the various stakeholders or reviewing the available data. We want to agree on what is the core problem with the stakeholders, and we want to identify a specific problem with clear limitations as far as possible. So we don't want it to, if we move to renewable energy, it's a silver bullet, the production issues in a company that is producing some product or something they use. So we want to be very clear as to the limitations of the possible solution. We want to clearly identify what are the causes and what are the effects. And then we want to develop a solution tree. And we want to then select the preferred intervention. So we don't want to have the answer before we understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. So we just want to jump and say, okay, renewable energy, maybe we should move to, but we need to really understand problem so we can make a better informed decision with regard to the solution. Okay, now I have some drawings here. Basically, what I'm trying to do here is to highlight that this is an iterative process before to ensure that we have a clear understanding of the core problem. And again, I want to jump on Gerald's example with regard to, yes, you want to change and use renewable energy, but that is not your problem. It's probably some other production issue, some other process issue. So you really need to interrogate the data, the stakeholders, and have an understanding of what is the core problem, what are the direct causes, what are the indirect causes, and what is the immediate effect of the problem. And that is all that that diagram seeks to do. Now, additionally, it just representing it in a different way here, looking at secondary causes, direct causes, the core problem, and the immediate effects. Okay, in completing the problem tree, you will need, as I mentioned before, the problem in specific and manageable terms. So the concept note needs to start to, narrow the problem in very clear and specific terms. And more often, the core problem should be expressed in a negative term, because when you get to the other piece of the project development, and partners will ask for a logical framework, you need to be able to flip that negative term and show the positive impact that the project will have. So we also need to establish a hierarchy of cause and effect. And we also need to separate effects into interim effects and long-term effects. Okay, the next step is to develop the objective tree. And the development of the objective tree involves flipping the negative statement, as I mentioned before, to a positive statement. And the objective tree is what demonstrates the means-end relationship between objectives. So how would the action that is being proposed, or the project that is being proposed, facilitate the attainment of the objective? And an example is that, okay, there's lack of service, or it could be that is the high cost of service, of high cost of electricity. And what you would want to achieve is to reduce the cost of electricity, that electric service, by 20% by a certain time by adopting this renewable strategy and implementing this project. Okay, I will pause there and take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, June. We are going to limit this Q&A segment to 2 and at most 3 questions. We're encouraging our participants to please pose any questions in the Q&A platform. And I know, June, that you made a very important point. While Gerald would have presented and focused on the technical solutions to some of these problems that we're trying to address in developing our projects, you've highlighted the importance of our solutions not being strictly technical, that we acknowledge and assess some of the other parameters of developing our projects, including social parameters. You mentioned gender, and CCREEE mainstreams gender, for example, across all of its programs. In the chat, I believe I caught a glance of a conversation that related to keeping the lights on to support or to prevent, rather, or to curb domestic violence cases. And so it really signals to me the fact that our participants can connect the dots and can identify some of the other social problems that sustainable energy projects can help to counter. In terms of gender, though, I know you did define gender. How does one really go about, say, for example, a company wants to reduce its operational cost and wants to do so through energy efficiency and renewable energy? How does that company take into account matters such as gender and other social matters in doing that situational analysis?
Thank you. Okay, now it's important to understand who does what in the, what is the production line. So it may be that, okay, we say automate some more renewable energy, and it may be that in improved production or with the new systems, etc., you reduce the number of women employed because of the nature of the functions they perform that could probably be automated. Just giving an example off the top of my head. So it's important to really understand who does what and how will impact them. And this is a consultative way, bringing persons together and probably through focus groups, asking questions, etc., getting a better understanding of whether what you're proposing, how it will impact different audiences, to ensure that, okay, if you have no choice but you're going to do that, then maybe a complementary project or initiative within the project could be to provide some training for the women so that they can access other opportunities. So, it depends on the nature of what is identified, but you really need to understand and you need to consult with all the various groups, both men and women, in a meaningful way to really understand how they are situated or how they participate in this or in the issue, or how it will impact them, or how will a potential solution impact them. And then to make the necessary, because it may be that you need to do certain things for the men because they perform a different function. And something I've been learning very recently is with regard to the fishing industry, say here in Barbados, where the women are normally the ones who will sell the fish. I never knew before, it's only recently I learned that the women are really the ones who own the boats. So they get the guys to go out to do the heavy lifting with regard to the fish, etc., and also to do certain cleaning, but it is the work. So if you're making a decision about how do we power the boats moving to a different type of fuel, instead of using diesel, say we want to move to some solar power or some other power that will reduce the cost of fuel for operating the fishing boats, then you also need to consult with the women because they are the ones who may hold the mortgage and the boat, etc. So you really need to understand who owns what, what will impact them, that type of thing, to really make an informed design and or to the project. If you design in something that would change the use of what fuel is used to power boats, then you need to consult with both the men and the women. You need to understand who owns what and who does what.
All right. So I see another question here for you. Is there always a problem? Can one recognize an opportunity without it being stemmed from a problem?
Definitely, yes. There may be resources available, and it may be timely that you could change the way you operate and move towards renewable energy without necessarily being a problem. But to some extent, there's also always something that you're trying to solve. So you're not solving a problem that is that directly impacts you with regard to the use of renewable energy, but the whole reducing your contribution to the emissions, etc., is helping a general problem. So the problem may not be directly related to you, and there may be no very obvious problem, but it is a proactive way of dealing with something which may manifest in the future, or it could be just a grand idea to change ways, and it will improve production. So it's not really a problem, but it's an opportunity to do better or to contribute to our stewardship with regard to the environment.
And I know you mentioned, June, that example of the fishing industry. I wanted to even use an example of the energy sector. So Gerald had walked us through what he thought is a good order of things. And so you made the important point. Do you start a project by saying, okay, the opportunity here is that I have an opportunity to install renewable energy. Why are you installing renewable energy? And Gerald also mentioned the fact that it's important to conduct, say for a business, conduct an energy audit, and you pick the lower hanging fruit. So the audit may recommend that your first step would be to implement energy efficiency measures. And then as you spoke, it did paint a very clear picture for me. Within a company, let's say a manufacturing company, a hospital, a government building, you now have to ask the question, who uses which appliances? Because energy efficiency really looks at your lighting, your AC units, other appliances that require electricity, but who uses what? Who uses the photocopying machine? And establishing what that situation is, analyzing that situation really is important in helping to craft that project. In the case that you proceed to installing solar PV panels to offset your consumption from the grid or from fossil fuels, who do you have to convince? Because an organization is made up not just of management making decisions, but you have the users within the company, and how do you bring your workers on board? So I think your presentation has fit in very well into the first steps of how do I initiate a project, how do I conceptualize it, what leads me to developing that project, what leads me to this idea or concept, and why am I doing what I am doing? And that certainly helps to start the ball rolling in an effective way as you conceptualize your projects. So June, with that, I would like to sincerely thank you for that informative presentation. I see there are questions on whether or not the information will be presented. Let me remind participants that all resource material will be shared with you at the closing of the event. So June, thank you so much for that presentation.
You're so welcome.
Now I see another question in here, and again, it signals to me that we are reaching folks from all over. So we do have a participant from Spain saying that because of the language barrier, that he or she did not understand everything, but that there is a hope that we can translate to Spanish or in future include a translator. We certainly will take that into account, and for the benefit of that participant, sí dimos cuenta de que usted no comprendió todo en esa presentación, pero vamos a tomar en cuenta esta necesidad para tener un traductor para el idioma. Muchas gracias. And so we were trying to ascertain who is present here in the room in terms of geography. And we just heard from June the importance of data and demographics. And so let's take another stab at this poll. I invite our IT support to please launch that poll. Let's hope that this time you are able to select your location. Again, a reminder, question 1, unfortunately, because of the technical limitations, we weren't able to include all of the countries in one question. And so there are 2 questions, but they aim to gather the same information. If your country is not listed in question 1, please proceed to question 2. And let's leave 1 minute for us to gather your responses. And if you're from a Caribbean country that is not within CARICOM, there is that option. And likewise, if you are not from the Caribbean, that option is also included in question 2. And we're at 48% response from our participants. We encourage you. We're just about halftime. We're going up. We're 51%. I'm hoping that at least we could get up to 80%, 100% would be great. It's just a click. It's a simple click. Please just choose which response relates to you, your location. Please respond to the poll and not in the chats. We're happy to see you using the chat, but it's important that we can capture on through the poll. I'm seeing that some folks cannot access the poll, cannot see the poll. We will look into that. We apologize. I'm not sure what that technical glitch is. Everyone should be seeing the poll. My colleagues are informing me that you do have the option of clicking on poll. It is at the bottom of your screen. If you click, there's a little icon there that looks like a graph, a bar graph, and right below it is polls. It's right next to the Q&A button. So I will just permit a few more seconds now that we have that clarification so that you can access the poll. Okay, some of our participants do not have that particular option. Okay, it may be a function of the version of Zoom. Okay, I'm informed by our IT department. It may be that the version of Zoom is different and would require updating to allow you to see that. I do apologize for that glitch. And so at this point, I would say we could stop the poll. I believe we have 64% participation. And let's see if we can see the results. Can we access the results, Galen? All right. So again, apologizing for those who were not able to access the poll. But I see we have quite a bit of participants from Barbados. In fact, if I am not mistaken, all except St. Vincent and the Grenadines, all of our CARICOM member states are present. Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago also represented. We have another 20% of our participants that are from the Caribbean and not necessarily from a CARICOM member state, and 11% from outside of the Caribbean. We do welcome you all. All right, so we're getting into the meat of the matter where we take a deep dive into the concept development of sustainable energy projects. To do so, we have developed a concept template for your benefit. And it really is simply to remove that layer of responsibility from you to decide, oh, what should I really put in a project concept? I want to access support from the CCREEE PPF. CCREEE works with a number of other partners, including donors. You heard about the CRAF being the Credit Risk Abatement Facility that is housed with the CDF, CARICOM Development Fund. And to access any of these services, how do I start? Somebody at the CCREEE, at the CDF, at the IDB, at the World Bank, at the any of our other multilateral and development agencies must be able to, in one glance, have something that can describe that project. And so a project concept, and I want to stress that, and we deliberately stayed away from describing it as a project proposal, because what we're requiring from applicants to the facility is not necessarily a full project proposal that is now directly presented to an investor or financier. Remember that project development cycle that I would have spoken about. So at the point of originating that project and now having a project that is ready for investment, there's still quite a lot. And you heard about the technologies, and you heard about the situational analysis and the social aspects. And a lot of these things, and all of these things, in fact, must be well thought out, well developed, data driven. So a pre-feasibility study, simply cannot be on, okay, I feel that this is an area where the project can be done and it doesn't affect anybody. But what processes do you go through in developing that project, taking that concept, that responds to your problem, that opportunity that you've identified. And so that the concept template has been developed in a manner, we hope, that is simplified, that allows you to give key information as you submit your applications for further support. And remember that the development cycle does include the development of a business plan, and none of these services cannot be provided as long as the project is not well conceptualized and on our end, if we're unable to understand what the concept is, what really is happening here, what is the technology, what are we trying to achieve, where is the project located, some very simple and basic information. Now, to help us do that, earlier I mentioned, let me take the opportunity to also, again at this point, thank the TAPSEC for its support. And through the support from TAPSEC, we have been able to engage with a consultant that will assist us in this process, in the person of Mr. Enrique Reboledo. And I will just tell you a little about Enrique before I invite him to speak. So Enrique is a climate finance specialist. He also has operated as a trainer and an evaluator on the transition to low carbon economic development and climate risk. Enrique has over 18 years of experience across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Enrique also has experience in developing, implementing, and evaluating financial and economic structures for public and private sustainable infrastructure investments. And that includes renewable energy, energy efficiency, urban development, and mobility sectors, so the transport sector. Enrique has proven experience and capabilities in facilitating financing for public and private climate action, including carbon market initiatives, investment readiness, enabling environments, climate risk, policy design, and finance access. So over the next 3 days, we'll be hearing, along with the PPF team, you will be hearing a lot from Enrique as we go through that template. I wanted to just check with my colleagues, and maybe we could use the chat if you could confirm, or rather those who have difficulty and have not received the template, the project concept template via email, if you could just confirm that, reach out to us in the chat. If you have, I think there's no need to comment. I'll also ask my colleagues if it is possible to share that document directly in the chat in the event that others have not yet been able to access it. Enrique, that said, I do invite you to take the floor.
Well, thank you very much. I hope that you can see me and you can hear me. I'm really happy to be here. Good morning. I'll be with you the next 3 days, although this is almost the last part of the day. I just put on the chat the template on a Word file, so it's easy just to see it. And I'm really happy to be here. I was part of the update of the NDC for Barbados. I prepared several plans for investment in the Caribbean, including the Bahamas, Jamaica, Belize, Suriname, and so on, Guyana as well. And I'm really happy to be here. The practical way I see by experience is that I'm a consultant, that I help putting things that are somehow complicated or complex in a way that is simple and is easy to understand. The tool we have at hand today, I think is very practical because it helps in just establishing the priorities that we see that we have in our countries, the resources we have at hand, and of course identifying what is missing and the next things that we have to do, the next steps, activities, and so on. Without any further ado, you will see that we'll have this template. I'll try to share my screen, and this will be the tool that you'll have for the next couple of days. You should see my screen now. It's on purpose showing my whole screen. Please let me know if you can see a project concept template. I hope so. Otherwise, just correct me if I'm wrong. The thing here we have here is a very simplified approach in terms of doing this project preparation. What we want to do is to improve the chances for projects to become funded, improved, supported, refined, and so on. So you will see this is a template that we have that is very approachable and you can relate. Perhaps it has a lot of things in common with other approaches we have in different financing entities, in different windows that provide technical assistance. And the work that that CCREEE is doing is fundamental in terms of improving the chances of getting to a success end in terms of getting the financing, but not only the financing, but guaranteeing the long-term sustainability of the project. So anyway, we'll go down to the document, and I hope that you can download it because it will be the best way to take advantage of these few days that we will be working together. I emphasize that we have the help desk. You can send emails regarding questions or resources that you might think that are practical and useful. But at the end of the 3 days, we hope that you have a very advanced set of documents. It's only one document, so it's 7 pages only. It's not very lengthy, but you will see that it's a good way to put your perspective, your experience, and the opportunities that you have in front of you as opportunities for investment. So this is document. You should have it on the chat. Otherwise, our team will make sure that you can get it. Please, if you don't get it, please send an email or just put it on the chat. Anyway, so the document is structured in 3 sections. The project summary, which is basically talking about what is the purpose about, the project about, the experience of the team, the challenges that the project is aimed to solve. And then the project description, which is a common thing that happens in many projects related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. This is the most technical part of the document. Then potential partnerships and agreements, what is that you have, the ideas that are important for financiers and advisors to know. And then more project details. This is just the metrics of the projects. This is a common thing that you will see in many applications. And then we'll talk about the investment information, specifically financial sustainability, the investment breakdown you have, and the potential risks. Again, the whole purpose of this template is to consider all the elements that are important for advancing your proposal. You will see that we try to make a template that is as practical as possible. And of course, this template is made with an idea that complies somehow with multiple financing and technical assistance windows. So the information you get here, probably you can use it in several other applications. So it's a good time that you will devote for this, and it's a good effort, I think. Anyway, so we'll go to the first page. I'll go to the template, and then we'll go to the case study. The purpose of this session here today is just to introduce the template and the case study, and then we'll use this in the next couple of days in going into the details of how this can be assembled. So the first section is the project summary. You will see it here. Basically, this is what you complete at the end of the document. So this is just the summary. So you don't have to do this first. Then we talk about project development status, where the project is, the experience of the team, what is the team, what is that you're doing, where you're coming from, the challenges that you see in terms of what you can see and what are the potential avenues. It doesn't have to be a rock solid. It doesn't have to be a science-based target. It has to be something that is more approachable and something that everyone can understand. The whole purpose here is, again, to assure that we have a good proposal that makes sense, and then that can be improved and refined together with CCREEE. Then we have the project description here. And in this section is basically what we're talking about in terms of the business, the capacity of our installation, if it's an installation, if it's an energy efficiency project, what sort of demand is serving, the context of the country, if it's serving some of the goals associated with climate change or energy security in the country, energy poverty, creating jobs, innovations, and so on. We'll provide some references to these documents along these 2 days. Then we'll talk about partnerships. This is an optional section, but again, it's important to see how you have done some progress in terms of associating with the suppliers, contractors, if you have letters of intent and so on. And then project details. And probably this is some of the sections that people struggle the most, because you have to provide information about the technology, the performance, the cost of the technology, the availability of the technology, the service you have, and so on. Then the expectations and adjusting the investment you require that will impact the duration of the project, the life cycle of the project, the cost of the project, the operational costs, and so on. And of course, then we'll talk about investment information. So we'll talk about the possibilities of a project in terms of generating savings or generating income, how it's structured, and then we'll go to the investment breakdown. We want to know how much money you want to invest in terms of the equipment, maintenance, labor, engineering, and so on. Of course, the red tape or the permits that are associated with this. And of course, we want to know if these are things that are costs that are necessarily financial in terms of getting money into the table, or these are costs that are associated with a regulation that is hindering the investment, that can be the trigger for your investment. And then we'll talk about the money that you have, if any. If nothing is there, it's all right. What we want to know is a description of what can be accomplished in terms of the investment or investors, the potential partners of this, if any commercial financing is available, and so on. And then the latest part is that this is a simplified table showing the risks associated with the project. These are, you will see them here on the table. We're talking about natural technology, regulatory and economic risks. This is just an example, and the impact they have and the potential they have to become a reality. So if this is a template, let me show you that we have then a case study. And this case study is basically the document we have filled out by a supermarket. We're talking about, this is the summary of the supermarket. This is the ABC Inc. Supermarket that is established in Warren's Commercial Center in Barbados. The sort of energy that they are producing, they have a product and service because they have a two-folded investment proposition. They have a product because they use the electricity as a way to improve the service they have at the bottom line of the business, and the service because they are aware that they need to have a service behind the provision of the photovoltaic system they are aiming to work on. The off-taker is themselves. They are talking about self-consumption and grid connected. We have heard from Gerald and other speakers before about the benefits of doing different ways and approaching to technologies in different ways. Some lessons that we have to consider in terms of developing a good business model. We see the capacity here. Again, the issue of scale is at stake here. We know that the capacities are different than those associated in large countries. But anyway, still there are good opportunities for business. And the most important thing I will say is to be aware that these are good business opportunities to attract investment. So the business case is there. The important challenge, I will say, is to put it in a structured way. And then I won't go more into detail on this. I think this will be shared, or is shared on the chat. But the important thing is that you have these documents at hand, and the idea is that we go through the next few days, and it will be ideal for you to have it on your screen so you can just work on your document, on your proposal, and make sure that you have an account and register for the PPF from what Safari just shared before. This is key. So we work on that, and we work online in parallel with what we have on the screen, the template, the materials we have at hand, the reference materials and other documents. So at the end of these 3 days, we make sure that we have somehow a good draft of our proposal. It doesn't matter if they are not necessarily on the same topic. They don't have to be photovoltaic. They can be any of the technologies that we discussed in the previous sessions. The idea is that you have a completed or more completed draft. With that in mind, we still have at the same time, not online, but we'll have the offline help desk. And with that, we can just respond to some of the questions. So you can come back tomorrow with these questions. We'll try to answer those in the next sessions. And if we cannot answer those, we'll have still a Thursday and Friday to complete those, with the idea that you can just help yourself from the help desk and asking for the questions that you feel that are missing, the resources that you might need. And of course, our aim is that at the end of the week, we have as many proposals completed as possible. And I think this is a good challenge for us. I will stop here. I know that this is just a brief session, but the whole idea here is to introduce the documents. You will see that the documents are not complicated. They're like that on purpose, because there will be challenges down the line, and we'll get to that point later, tomorrow and the next day. But the whole idea is, again, just to put a good idea, a good concept note together that makes sense, that is vertically consistent, and it's solving the problems that you face as a business or as a country. So with that said, I would just turn to you, Charlene, and stop sharing.
Thank you, Enrique. And yes, I do see that template in the chat. I see a comment from a participant that the template is looking good. And we don't want to waste that good look. So we're asking participants to please, and perhaps allow me to give you a bit of homework, to go through that template. Let's make use of the opportunity, not just for this training, but the added benefit of the help desk that is available to you. What I am hoping is that, especially in the cases where you have project ideas and concepts that you wish to submit for support, use the opportunity to already look at the template. There is a case study. So there is an example that we've chosen, ABC Inc., Barbados. That is not an actual supermarket chain in Barbados, but the information most certainly is representative. So we've taken the time to use that case example. So please look at the details, familiarize yourself with the details, familiarize yourself with the template, and use the opportunity today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And I don't think I said this in the earlier interventions that I made, but we will close off comments and questions to the help desk on Wednesday. Thursday and Friday, we will dedicate solely to answering your questions. In fact, on Friday, we would also open up, and so we would communicate with you via email in the event that some of your questions lead to developing a particular project, and that we see the value in having a meeting set up. We will be reserving Friday to set up some one-on-one meetings with you. But that, again, that is only in the case that you do have a project concept that you are developing and that you wish to apply through the PPF for support. I believe there was an earlier question on whether or not we have a deadline to your applications. General applications continue. There is no deadline. It's on a rolling basis, but we do have a very interesting technology specific call that is live, and that is a solar PV call. In fact, my colleague calls it the sunshine window. And so we ask you to make use of that opportunity and submit your solar PV project concept. So in the event that you have a solar PV project and you just haven't wrapped your head around the concept, or developing a document that you require to submit to us, please use that template and develop it. I believe I see some questions in the chat. I think, Enrique, there is a question to you, a request that if you could walk through the case study. I do know that we had that intended for that to be later on in the agenda, but it could be good, especially that we're giving homework to our participants, Enrique, if you could just run us through very quickly on the case study.
Absolutely. I'll go to the case study. All right. I hope that I see my screen now. So basically, I'll go to the details. This is a section you fill out at the end. So we won't take a look at this, but this is what you already see. In this section, we talk about the project development status that is on this project. These guys are saying that they have a pre-feasibility study, which is that the project owner is researching the feasibility of the project. So very simple terms, we don't want to complicate things. We talk about the experience of these guys, including the team's composition, if they have something in the past in their experience. So they don't have to be project developers. So these guys are representing a supermarket. So you're not necessarily working as an energy company. So that's important. We talk about briefly about the team. You see that the team is somehow simple, but I won't talk about much because then you don't have homework. So this is the whole purpose of the meeting today. We talk about how management is thinking about energy efficiency or renewable energy, again, as an investment, as a way to save costs. save money or save or just to make to have a reliant source of energy. Somehow the story of the company, you will see it here. I won't talk about much of it, because this will be the items that we'll discuss yet tomorrow. We'll talk about the challenges that you see in your own country, what is limiting your capacity in moving forward, and specifically, I think this is very important for the audience. What is the specific assistance that you would seek in CCREEE? So if it's about getting advice, in getting the engineering, in getting the connection with the investors, in the matchmaking, and so on. I think this is important because CCREEE is a fantastic resource, but it's so important just to come to the table with a clear idea of what I want from CCREEE. Then we'll talk about the project description, which is a common thing that we see. People talk about, I have a 75 kilowatts installation, I need money. So that's a very difficult value proposition to sell to anybody. So we have to frame it in a way that this makes sense, and that we have the right partners at the right context described here. So we talk about the context of each country, if it's about the energy security, affordability, sustainability, if it's about climate change, if it's about gender. So these are important elements. We try to make it as simple as possible. We don't have to talk much about metrics. We don't want to make it complicated, sophisticated, scientific, or anything. If you want to go into that detail, it's perfect. But please bear in mind that we have some words limitations, so we don't go into too much detail. For example, in this case, we talk about the commitments of Barbados in terms of renewable energy to 2030. Partnerships and agreements. It's important to see if you have some sort of a discussion with contractors, with the government, you have permits and so on. If this is a concession, if you're serving a public utility, etc. And then we talk about the project details. And I think this is one of the most interesting traits of this template. We don't go into much details. We don't go into much details in the engineering. We talk about what we want to do in plain words, in plain English, even for me. So it's an important matter. We work about practical terms. So we want to reduce costs by doing engineering, installing a plant. Where is the plant based? What do we have in so far? The key activities. What is the technology that we want to use? Anything. You see that it's not very sophisticated. Permits and licensing that we see, that we understand, but of course we know that many other permits are down the line that are important to see and to assess. Our team, the project duration and gender balance. And then we talk about the financial sustainability of the project. But again, we want to know the financial sustainability in your own terms. We want to sell electricity, we want to save money, we want to do this by installing more energy efficiency devices, and but in a very practical way. This is not a technical proposal. If the project generates money or saves money, so we have several options here. I won't go into much detail here. The investment breakdown, what is that we expect to have in terms of the cost associated with different things. You see here a description of the money that we need to get our project on the ground. The money that we have secured so far, and then the risks. Again, you see that the risks are relatively are approachable. You can mention them. It's not complicated. We don't have to talk about analytical risks or any complicated mechanisms to describe or quantify risks. These are just risks that we can just talk with anybody without going into much detail. Again, what we want is to have a vertical consistency across the template. And that's one of the things, in my opinion, that makes proposals good, as long as they are completed and they are, again, consistent across the different sections. So this is the template that is filled out with this case study. So these are two documents, basically at two different stages. So I'll see there are questions, just in case. Shalini, that's all right? Okay.
Yes, Enrique. So we do have some more questions. And right before we take these questions, and we're nearing the close of today's session in preparation for tomorrow. But right before we close with these questions, let us just launch. We do have a couple questions in the polls just to allow us ahead of tomorrow to understand the composition of our participants, and that will really help us in tailoring the message and the training tomorrow. So I'm going to invite poll number 2, and it really focuses on the sector that you represent. And you have some very basic options on screen. Which sector do you represent? The options being energy, manufacturing, commerce, tourism, agriculture, health services, construction, or others that are not mentioned or represented. And the second question on screen would be, what type of entity do you represent? Government, utility, private sector, NGOs, academia, or others? And as is customary, I will allow for 1 minute so we could complete these polls. We're at 40%. And I think if we can aim for at least 60%, noting that we do have, unfortunately, participants who cannot access the poll. We're 10% off, inviting all to please select your responses. And those of you who have, please take note again of the website that leads to the CCREEE portal. Also, you would note the email address that is provided, PPF at CCREEE, CCREEE being 2 C's, 1 R, .org. Please use today, Tuesday, and Wednesday to submit any questions or particular areas that you would like for us to address as you go through the template and hopefully develop your own project concepts. I think our minute is just about up. Let's just see the results of that poll very quickly before we go into the final Q&A segment. Okay, we're seeing a lot of energy folks in the room. Manufacturing, 3%, the tourism sector represented, agriculture, construction, and we have other sectors represented, with 27% of those who would have voted. I note that in terms of the entities that are represented, we have quite a few government folks in the room. And of course, we do encourage you to use this same template. Remember that the project preparation facility caters both to the public and the private sectors. And the private sector, I guess the largest group represented based on those who voted, seeing the academia, so our universities well represented, NGOs, utilities, all well represented. And thank you so much, Galen. And let's just head back to the Q&A. I believe there is one last question that we need to take at this point. Can we apply for multiple projects? And the great answer to that is yes, you can. We have no limits on the number of project proposals submitted by one person or one entity. And one last poll, very simple click, and we end that session right after that poll. What renewable energy technologies or energy efficiency technologies are you considering for your project? So for those who have projects in mind, who would love to use this training to help them develop a particular project, what are the technologies that you have in mind or that you're considering for your project? Again, quite like our first poll, because of our technical limitations, we've had to separate this particular poll into 2 questions, simply to be able to capture all the responses. So it's listed as question 1 and 2, but it's all one in the same pool. Just a few more seconds. And while we await the responses, let me already start thanking those who participated as presenters, our Executive Director, Dr. Gary Jackson, the team lead from TAPSEC, and TAPSEC is the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, Mr. Gerald Lindo, Sustainable Energy Expert at the CCREEE, Mr. Faya Vital, Sustainable Energy Junior Engineer with the CCREEE, Ms. June Ale from Compete Caribbean, and Mr. Enrique Reboledo, who participated in today's sessions. All right, I do vote to end the poll. It'll be good for us to see the results on screen. Solar, energy storage. Energy storage, I think, was a bit surprising for me. We've seen 26% interested in wind, 13% hydro, quite a bit of interest, 21% bioenergy, 6% in geothermal, 50% waste energy, marine technologies. We did have a question on whether CCREEE supports emerging technologies. Most certainly marine technologies, OTEC, among others, supported. Energy storage, 49%, e-mobility, 28%. And on the energy efficiency side, LED lighting, energy management, 56%, and others that we may not have captured in our list, 28 and 18% respectively. Very interesting. We thank you so much for participating. Participants, we do look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we continue our training and we take a deep dive now into the development of that concept template. Please take some time between now and then to have a look at the template and to gather the information that you require for your own project concepts and come ready with questions for us. On behalf of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, in partnership with the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, I am Charlene Bodley, and I thank you.